by dawn will keep things frost-free. And it will be a grey, damp start for many of us, the rain making it to eastern England by mid-morning, northeast Scotland by later in the morning. So damp conditions, the rain on and off, not particularly heavy, and generally clearing from Wales, southwest England, as well as Northern Ireland by the afternoon. Northern Ireland seeing the highest temperatures, 14 Celsius here, albeit with a few sharp showers developing. And those sharp showers will push into western Scotland, parts of Wales and the southwest during the evening. The main area of persistent rain clearing from north Scotland, and then we've all got the cloud and the showers continuing into the early hours, especially for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. But with the cloud and the breeze, temperatures staying up at 8 to 10 Celsius. So certainly not a cold start to Wednesday. Away from the north of Scotland, many places will be mild again. And then we've got the next system pushing in across southwest England first thing, moving into Wales as well as Northern Ireland by the end of the morning. That will sweep across the country. It will be followed by showers on Thursday, and it's going to be particularly mild, 16 or 17 Celsius.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here with you 3 till 6. And we start today's show with some big breaking news in Scotland. Humza Yousaf has been named as the new leader of the SNP. Here's the moment he found out he'd won.
I therefore declare Humza Yousaf duly elected as the Scottish National Party leader.
And has the government managed to fend off a massive Tory rebellion against the illegal migration bill? We'll be taking that live throughout the course of this show as the big hitters weighed in. They didn't think the illegal migration bill went far enough, which is unlike a lady who heckled Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman in Chelmsford earlier.
Migrants in this country! Go away! We don't want you here!
Well, it's strong stuff. And yes, Prince Harry is in court. No, not for that. He's, of course, got his privacy hearing against Associated Newspapers. We'll bring you updates as that gets cracking. And just to round us off this hour as well, ULEZ is the bane of a lot of motorists' existence, but drivers have struck back. A load of cameras have been desecrated, vandalised, covered up with bags. We'll be talking about all of that, especially with a chap who actually got fined for mooning a police speed camera, believe it or not. All that coming your way and much, much more. Stay tuned. Yes, get your views coming in thick and fast. GBviews at gbnews.uk. What do you make of that breaking news that Humza Yousaf is the new leader of the SNP? GBviews at gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 3:02. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party, succeeding Nicola Sturgeon. The Health Secretary claimed victory over Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan. He won 52% of votes. Mr Yousaf is set to become Scotland's youngest First Minister and also the first from an ethnic minority background to hold the post. Speaking at Murrayfield, he said he was honoured to be entrusted with the party leadership.
I'm not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as the leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, "The opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life."
The Prime Minister says he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to antisocial behaviour. During a visit to Essex, Rishi Sunak unveiled a £160 million scheme that'll include forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their communities. The government plans to make laughing gas a Class C drug, with nitrous oxide banned before the end of the year. The Prime Minister said current restrictions on the gas aren't working.
We're going to do over the course of the spring and the summer is consult on the best way to do this to make sure that it is effective. Tackling supply is important. That's why we've gone out after county line gangs and disrupted 3,500 of them. It's why we've toughened up sentencing for drug supply. It's why the police have got those things called Project Adder, for example, which is a national programme to target drug gangs in particular. So all of those things help deal with supply. We need to get the consultation right.
Deputy Speaker of the House of Lords, Baroness Helen Newlove, thinks the crackdown should start in education.
We've heard these measures before, and actually I welcome any measure that would stop antisocial behaviour, but there's nothing new in this that's already out there, and we've got to have the resources and people, the enable policing. And if they mention probation officers, well, that's on its knees as well. So, no, I don't think any of these policies are new, and we're still going to struggle to tackle antisocial behaviour, most importantly with police who class it as lower level.
Lawyers for the publishers of the Daily Mail say privacy claims brought by high-profile individuals, including Prince Harry, are stale and should be dismissed without a trial. The Duke of Sussex, who's at the High Court in London, is among a group including Sir Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, who are launching legal action against associated newspapers for unlawful information gathering. The newspaper group denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to place listening devices in cars and homes and recording phone calls. The preliminary hearing will last 4 days. New figures show police in England and Wales carried out strip searches on children as young as 8. Figures published by the Children's Commissioner for England show more than 2,800 strip searches were reported between 2018 and 2022. The report found black children were up to 6 times more likely to be searched. The data also showed more than half of the searches were carried out without an appropriate adult present. Police and Crime Commissioner Donna Jones thinks it should be made mandatory to have an adult there.
This is the deprivation of a young person's liberty. This really is the sort of thing that will stay with them and could haunt them for the rest of their lives. And also, we have to understand that if young people as young as 8, 9, 10 are carrying drugs concealed within their private and intimate parts of their body, it's almost always because they are being exploited by criminal gangs.
Environmental charities and experts say an oil spill in Poole Harbour could have a devastating impact on sensitive nature reserves in the area. Around 200 barrels of fluid, including crude oil, leaked from a pipeline leading into the Witch Farm onshore processing facility, leading to a major incident being declared. Poole Harbour commissioners say the pipeline, operated by gas company Perenco, has been shut down. Teams using drones, boats and helicopters are working to identify further spills and assess the risk to the environment. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Now, of course, we start with the SNP, don't we, who've elected Humza Yousaf as their new leader. Yousaf has replaced Nicola Sturgeon, who resigned after 8 years as Scotland's First Minister. He won the leadership contest ahead of Kate Forbes and Ash Regan, and is Scotland's first leader for an ethnic minority background. I believe we can have a little clip of him.
Not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as a leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, "The opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life."
Well, there we go. Get your emails coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. What do you think this means for Scotland? What does it mean for potentially the next general election? What does it mean for Scottish independence? But here is a man in the know, and he's going to clear up some of those questions straight off the bat for you. It's Michael Simmons, who is a data journalist at The Spectator. Michael, thank you very much. Great to see you again. Let's start with the result itself, first and foremost. It wasn't a resounding, thumping victory for Humza Yousaf. In fact, people who are familiar with the Brexit referendum will recognise some of the numbers involved here. 52-48%, basically, wasn't it, he won by?
Yep, so I think people are not too surprised that Humza won, but people are surprised that it went through to the second round of voting. So in the first round, Ash Regan, the kind of no-hoper candidate, got just over 5,000 votes. And those votes were redistributed, and at that point it looked really close. And then Humza ended up winning, as you say, 52-48, that number in British politics that we just seem to not be able to escape from. But what's really interesting is that about a third of the SNP members didn't vote. And given that it was all electronic, you do think it would be so easy to vote. Why were so many people disillusioned from voting?
Well, what does this mean now going forward for the future of the SNP? Because clearly that party itself now is incredibly divided.
Yeah, so the party is divided, but I think for the initial stage at least, it will just be the continuity Sturgeon party. His opponents, Ash Regan and Kate Forbes, had basically hinted that the coalition deal with the Greens was going to collapse if either of them won. But Humza's going to keep that going. He's going to continue the sort of Sturgeon-era policies. So I think on the face of it, it will be continuity. But in the background, this election has unleashed factions within the party that aren't happy, and they're not going to stay quiet and disciplined like they have done for the last sort of 15 years. And you're going to be hearing discontented voices more.
Big question now, what does it mean for independence?
So I think independence is definitely on the back burner. I mean, Humza Yousaf is not going to say that as First Minister, but he made clear that he didn't really agree with Sturgeon's sort of it's always round the corner approach. And I think he will actually, in fairness to him, be a bit more honest with their supporters that actually it's something that they need to build towards. I think down here, you're still going to hear the SNP talking about independence, but I think they all know that it's not a realistic prospect, at least in the short-term future.
And just one more with you. What does this mean potentially looking ahead to the next general election? A lot of the reaction I'm seeing online appears to hint that this is actually a very good result for the Labour Party.
Yeah, I think the real winner today is probably Keir Starmer, because a lot of the SNP vote, or all the SNP vote, is really about that independence. But there is a chunk of their support who are ex-Labour voters who voted for the SNP because of independence, but also they thought it was going to be good governance. Humza Yousaf is not known for good governance, so if things don't go to plan, it's very easy to see those voters going back to Labour and then picking up seats in Scotland.
Just on that one, actually, Michael, I said last one, but I lied to you. Give me a bit of a rundown about Humza Yousaf's track record, OK? So what kind of guy are we dealing with here?
So Humza Yousaf has been rather unfortunate in all his ministerial posts. When he was the Transport Minister, he was caught by the police for driving his friend's car without insurance. When he was the Justice Minister, he brought through the hate crime legislation, which, as he initially had planned it, would regulate or criminalise your dinner table conversation. And then his most recent post has been as Health Secretary, and that led to leaders of the Scottish NHS saying that the service was about to fall over. So he's been rather unfortunate, to put it politely, in his time as government minister.
OK, yeah, I mean, and just on that as well, the free speech angle of it and the gender issue. I mean, a lot of people are saying that J.K. Rowling essentially did for Nicola Sturgeon. That's probably a bit too simplistic, but there is some merit to that view. Humza Yousaf, I don't know how he clears this up, because he is a little bit squiffy when it comes to things like gay marriage, and he's not quite as progressive in private, some could argue, as he maybe is in public. Is that correct?
Yes, so this vote that kind of people originally said did for Kate Forbes because she said she wouldn't have voted for gay marriage. Humza Yousaf missed that vote, and we're still not really clear about what he would have done if he was there. It does seem to look like he deliberately missed the vote. But I think that he's a pragmatic politician, so whatever his views are, he is just going to keep the progressive train going. That said, I don't think he'll set up a fight over the gender bill because he's seen what that did to Sturgeon, and I suspect in the coming weeks he'll find a way of making the gender bill go away.
There we go. Look, Michael, thank you as ever. Michael Simmons there, he's data journalist at The Spectator. He is right across everything Scotland and political. Well, it is the end of an era for Scottish politics, and the outgoing SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, has already given her backing to her replacement. I believe we can see tweets now. Yes, there we go. So Sturgeon tweeted, "I pay tribute to all three candidates for the SNP leadership for rising to the challenge. Most of all, I congratulate Humza Yousaf and wish him every success. He will be an outstanding leader and First Minister, and I could not be prouder to have him succeed me." So there we go. That's the view of outgoing leader Nicola Sturgeon. Let's whiz ourselves over to the Scottish Labour leader now, Anas Sarwar. Many are tipping him as actually the big winner when it comes to all of this. He congratulated Humza Yousaf, but went on to say that he's taking over a chaotic and divided party that's out of touch and out of ideas. And it does feel as though there's a big opening now for the Labour Party north of the border. Let's whiz ourselves over to the Scottish Tories and their leader, Douglas Ross. He's also congratulated Humza. It'd be a bit rude not to, wouldn't it? But he said that he and his party had serious concerns about Yousaf's ability to deliver for the people of Scotland, and that ties into what Michael Simmons was saying to us earlier, doesn't it? His track record at transport, at health and at justice as well, I think, let's be honest with you, is a little bit squiffy. But let's actually go to Scotland now, people, to Edinburgh no less, and join GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who was there witnessing it all unfold before his very eyes. Tony, Humza Yousaf then, obviously it wasn't a resounding victory, but he did win nonetheless. What was he like in his speech?
Yeah, well, certainly, I think his speech, you know, he hit all the key points, didn't he? He made remarks about his family and obviously his journey through politics, the history of his family since arriving in Scotland, and then when it came to the actual meat and potatoes of what is in his entry when he takes office later this week, you know, it was the things that quite frankly, defined all three candidates' campaigns over the last 5 weeks. So, you know, we know the NHS. He, I imagine, will be able to take a slight sigh of relief where he can have kind of 1 degree of separation from all that's going on in the NHS just now. The NHS is really struggling at the minute, especially in dentistry and in other parts of it. And of course, we know that the cost of living crisis in Scotland is just as bad as anywhere else in the UK. You know, some reports that our energy bills are actually the highest in the UK. And when he eventually, once he'd made his way through the list of the general governance issues that we all wanted to hear from him, we got the note on independence. So that was kind of shoehorned in there at the end. I find it really interesting, actually. I mean, his and Kate Forbes' attitudes to independence through this campaign was one of kind of gradualism, of eventually winning people over, winning hearts and minds. He never went so far as Kate Forbes as to talk about the no voters and appealing to the other side of the independence campaign. But a vote for Humza Yousaf today has meant that, you know, the SNP membership, they've understood that banging the door down of Westminster to try and get independence hasn't worked. And he was billed as a continuity candidate, but I think over the last couple of weeks specifically, we've actually seen some of his policies or ideas kind of take minor divergences to that of Nicola Sturgeon. And I think that's quite an interesting development for him, that he's recognised the success of Kate Forbes on the campaign trail and her take on bringing some of Nicola Sturgeon's 8-year-old ideas into 2023.
Tony, thank you very, very much. Tony Maguire there, GB News' Scotland reporter. I asked you all what you made of it, and the emails have been coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Interesting one from Ross, this. I'll just do one now, because I want to move on. But he says the Scottish population will not vote for Humza. And look, there is a sense that this is a really landmark moment in Scottish politics, the future of the SNP, which is clearly split as a result of this vote. You can see it there for all to see. Humza Yousaf winning by pretty much that famous 52-48% mark. We've had quite enough of both of those numbers in British politics, I think, but there you go. Could it open the door for Labour? What does it mean for independence? So, look, there we go. The dawn of a new era. Anyway, moving on. It is a landmark day in Scottish politics, but it also promises to be a significant day in Westminster because MPs are debating the illegal migration bill, and that's happening right now. We're going to go to the Commons shortly, and we'll bring you any big hitters throughout the course of this show who stand up and say their views on it all. It was thought that Rishi Sunak was actually going to face the biggest Tory rebellion since he became Prime Minister on this, from a lot of Tories who didn't think that this bill went far enough. But there is an update coming up on that in a moment. Earlier today, though, Sunak and Suella Braverman were heckled on a visit to Chelmsford by a woman demanding they allow more migrants into the country.
Allow migrants into this country! Go away! We don't want you here!
Right, there you go. And just in case you couldn't make that out, that was Rishi Sunak, Suella Braverman being shouted at by a woman in the street in Chelmsford who said, go away, we don't want you here, and allow migrants into the country. I'm joined now by our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, so we were originally thinking there was going to be some kind of widespread, large-scale Tory rebellion, but I understand that might not happen now.
It looks like, for now at least, the rebels have backed down. Yes, it was expected that up to 60 Conservative MPs might rebel against Rishi Sunak, might back various amendments put forward by people like Red Wall MP Jonathan Gullis, Danny Kruger, Simon Clarke, who was previously Levelling Up Secretary, essentially to toughen up the legislation and, if necessary, ignore the European Court of Human Rights to stop them interfering as they did last year when they grounded the flight to Rwanda. But it seems that at the moment they have decided not to pursue those amendments because they have been warned, first of all, that they could scupper the whole thing because all that's going to do is when it gets to the Lords, it's going to face an even rougher ride than it already will, and it will face a really tough ride in the Lords, and it will also make the One Nation Tories to the left, who are concerned about it being too tough, even more likely to rebel. So there's basically people saying it's too tough, there's people saying it's not tough enough, but the government are saying, well, Rishi Sunak saying it's a tough piece of legislation, the likes of which we've never seen. They are assuring the people on the right that they're listening, that they get the message, and they believe that they can stop the boats without having to sort of press the nuclear button.
Yeah, and a couple of those amendments were relating to migrant hotels. I think Gullis especially just wanted to outright ban the use of hotels for migrants. Exactly what would happen there, then we'd have to wait and see. That looks like that might be off the table as well, like you've just said there, about essentially making it easier to deport people without having to adhere to the ECHR. But one of the big potential rebellers, if that's the word, rebels, that's it. I'll find my words eventually. It is Monday, people. One of the big rebels on this could have been Suella Braverman, but that looks as though, which would have been quite tasty, wouldn't it, really? The actual Home Secretary rebelling on this, but that doesn't appear to be happening.
Well, there have been reports that perhaps the Home Secretary was behind some of this discontent, in that she was giving them a push because she actually would like this to go further. Of course, that has been vehemently denied, that she was in any way involved in any of this. And Rishi Sunak has made it clear today that they are not prepared to block or ignore either the UK courts or the European courts. But I think part of Suella Braverman's trip to Rwanda and looking at the hotels, looking at the houses that are being built, was trying to paint a picture that actually it's OK to be sent to Rwanda, and try to convince Europe basically to back off and let us send people. Because how are we going to stop this? Obviously, we've got the deal with the French, but that's not going to be enough in itself. We've got to make sure that people know that if they come, they're not going to stay.
For now, it does remain somewhat of a mystery, doesn't it? Because we were anticipating around 60 rebels. We were thinking, well, that is going to be around basically not listening to the ECHR, doing our own thing. Clearly, they have been given some reassurances on that, and clearly they feel now as though they don't need to rebel on it. But we will bring updates as and when we get it. Thank you very much, Catherine Forster there, our political reporter. I'm joined now by Harjap Singh Bangal, who's an immigration lawyer, who maybe can shed some light on exactly what reassurances some of these Conservative MPs might have been given. Harjap, thank you. So how on earth could they have been given a proper reassurance that we would be able to deport people in the way that, frankly, a lot of these Tories want us to, without pulling out of the ECHR?
I think Suella and Rishi have sort of convinced them, look, that despite all the opposition to the Rwanda plan, we did win the last case. It is going ahead. And, you know, trust us, pretty much trust the process. But it's also interesting what your political commentator said there, that there were rumours that Suella might have been behind the rebellion. And it might just be a case of, oh, damn, have I been caught out? And Rishi's not going to be happy now. I need to control this sort of situation and make sure it goes through. But I'm definitely hearing the same sort of stuff which you're hearing, that it was Suella Braverman who has placated the rebels and has told them, look, trust in me, trust in the process. I'm just as hardline right-wing on this as you are. And, you know, we'll manage to get it through.
But she's obviously, well, it would appear, obviously, saying to them, right, I've got a way through this. I've got a way of us staying in the ECHR. You don't need to rebel on this. Trust me. So what could have happened? Could she have gone to the ECHR and said, look, we're just going to press ahead with this anyway. Don't make us leave. Don't make us pull out. Let this one go. This is what we're going to do, and you're just going to have to deal with it. I don't want any more late-night foreign judges, faceless judges in dark rooms somewhere, blocking flights taking off from my country. If you let this slide, then we'll stick with you.
Well, I'll tell you what she should have done, if she was quite smart, and she might have done this, is she would have got the top legal heads together, because she's a barrister herself, let's not forget about this, and she would have dealt with a lot of issues in this in her line of work. She should have got the top heads together and said, right, how can I work around it? And if she's found a way around it, then she would have probably kept that to herself for the time being and said, look, I can get this through legally. So it does seem as if she does have some aces up her sleeve. If not, then this could all potentially really backfire, because you could end up having all of this chat and all of these visits to Rwanda and all of these lovely photos that you're showing us, and end up not actually sending anyone back. And the British public are not going to have that. And if that happens and nobody gets sent to Rwanda, and we realise that the British public realise that they've essentially been had and been sold another pipe dream, or dream, as it were, then I think at the election, the Conservatives are going to suffer for it.
Yeah, big time. Look, Harjap, thank you very much. Short and sweet today, but much appreciated nonetheless. Harjap Singh Bangal there is an immigration lawyer, and he raises a key point for us to finish on, ladies and gents, because is it just another pipe dream? Suella Braverman, it would appear, we were anticipating big Tory rebellion, 60 Tory MPs potentially coming out against this illegal migration bill. That appears to not be the case. So clearly discussions have taken place between the Home Secretary, who, as we know, is, at least verbally anyway, very, very against the idea that foreign judges, the ECHR, can stop our deportation. She has apparently managed to placate a lot of those Tory backbenchers. What she said, has she made a rod for her own back? Does it feel like déjà vu? Have we been here before, where people will have given promises, talked tough, and then not done anything? There appears to be a lot being done on trust in the backbenchers of the Tory party at the minute, and that could well come back to bite both Sunak and Suella Braverman. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Moving on, Prince Harry is in court today. No, it's not for that. He's suing the publisher of the Daily Mail. I will bring you the very latest on the goings-on from the High Court. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Now, Prince Harry is in the High Court as legal proceedings begin in a phone tapping and privacy case. Loves the word privacy, doesn't he? The Duke of Sussex, Sir Elton John, Liz Hurley and Sadie Frost are suing Associated Newspapers, who are the publishers of the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. And what you can see on your screens is Harry, or you could anyway, walking into court, even rather ironically, I think, considering it's a privacy case, bumping into a photographer on the way in. But there we go. I'm joined now by our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who stepped into the fray for us. So, Harry's in court, in a way.
Yeah, he's quite literally having his day in court, Patrick, and he very publicly entered the building, which, again, is a surprise because it's a I can't say the word.
Preliminary.
There we go.
Monday. We're all at it today, don't worry.
OK, preliminary hearing into this case. Essentially, the judge is deciding whether or not there is enough evidence for this case to go to a full-blown trial. So the allegations against the Associated Newspapers, who published the Mail, Mail on Sunday, Mail on 9, are the hiring of private investigators to secretly place listening devices inside people's cars and homes, listening to private telephone calls, payments to police officers who with corrupt links to private investigators. The list goes on. Mail on Sunday and Daily Mail publishers are essentially saying it's preposterous smears and unsubstantiated and highly defamatory claims. And they are saying, actually in court today, that all these claims have come too late, as in the case is almost stale, because the allegations in question happened late 90s, early 2000s, and like 20, 30 years has passed since then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does seem like it's kind of all being raked back up, doesn't it? But we're expecting this to rumble on for a little while yet, aren't we?
Yeah, 4 days, this preliminary hearing, and then we'll see whether or not the judge decides to make it go on to a full-blown trial. But this is Prince Harry's war against the press continuing, but clearly it's very significant because there are a number of other very high-profile figures involved in this particular case. Elton John, for example, David Furnish, Elizabeth Hurley, to name but a few. So clearly they feel like they have a case to answer. Prince Harry, clearly, since the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, has had a bit of a hatred towards the British press and the tabloid British press in particular, and in Spare, haven't we? We've talked for months about Spare and all the how he's talks about the press in that, and alleging members of his own family have been briefing against him and his wife Meghan in the press, fearing that Meghan will go down the same route as Diana in terms of, you know, suffering the same fate. So all of this, Prince Harry genuinely thinks it's his duty to essentially change the way the British media system works and seek justice for those who don't have as strong or public a voice as he does.
No, look, absolutely. This is him quite literally making his stand, or at least taking to it as well. Just a quick one, Karen. I don't want to catch you off guard too much here, but there is another royal story that's doing the rounds. Important to say that friends close to Prince Andrew have rubbished this, but Prince Andrew apparently planning to write a memoir?
I mean, that is what has been reported, that Prince Andrew is trying to is planning to write a memoir. Of course, we are led to believe that he has been asked to leave his home on the Windsor estate because it's falling apart, and King Charles essentially doesn't want to pay for the upkeep. He's been offered Frogmore Cottage. He's not very happy about that. Clearly, he's still very bitter about the fact that he is no longer a working member of the royal family, and that was not his choice. Unlike Prince Harry, that was his choice to leave as a working member. He feels like he wants to get his side of the story across, but we saw what happened in 2019 with the Emily Maitlis interview.
He has tried that once or twice before, and it's not necessarily gone that well for the guy.
Yeah, exactly. The argument is with a book that it's his words and he can't, and there's no interviewer asking him questions immediately off the back that he has to think about, but then clearly the book is going to be scrutinised, if it is true, as much as Prince Harry's.
Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. Maybe Cameron and I can live in Frogmore Cottage if Prince Andrew isn't happy about it. But there's still loads more to come between now and 4 o'clock. A Tory MP will give his reaction to Rishi Sunak's plans to crack down on anti-social behaviour. We've got loads on that, actually. Essentially criminalising begging even more. Is that fair? Do you think that's a bad look for the Tories, making people who have graffitied things wear high-vis jackets and do community service? Anyway, there's the latest as well on the oil leak in Poole Harbour that's been declared now as a major incident. Devastating stuff, that. But first, it's time for your latest headlines with Tamzin.
Patrick, thank you. Here are the headlines at 3:33. Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party, succeeding Nicola Sturgeon. The Health Secretary claimed victory over Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan. Turnout in the party's leadership election was 70%. Mr Yousaf, who is the youngest SNP leader and also the first from a minority ethnic background, won 52% of the votes. Speaking at Murrayfield, he said he was honoured to be entrusted with the party leadership.
I'm not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as the leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, "The opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life."
The Prime Minister says he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to antisocial behaviour. During a visit to Essex, Rishi Sunak unveiled a £160 million scheme that'll include forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their communities. The government plans to make laughing gas a Class C drug, with nitrous oxide banned before the end of the year. Lawyers for the publishers of the Daily Mail say privacy claims brought by high-profile individuals, including Prince Harry, are stale and should be dismissed without a trial. The Duke of Sussex, who's at the High Court in London, is among a group, including Sir Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, who are launching legal action against associated newspapers for unlawful information gathering. The newspaper group denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to place listening devices inside cars and homes and recording phone calls. TV, online, radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, we've got lots on today, but I want to bring you the latest from a major incident that's been declared in Dorset after an oil leak from Wyche Farm, one of the largest onshore oil fields in Europe, and the Health Security Agency is warning the public not to swim in Poole Harbour or the surrounding areas. And the local council says oil has escaped now into the area's water. So I'm going to bring you the latest now with Jeff Moody, who's been at the scene all day for us.
Well, however damaging this turns out to be for humans, there's no doubt that it's damaging for wildlife. There are thousands of birds, including terns and gulls, that are breeding here at the moment. They're making their nests out in Poole Harbour. But at the same time, birds that have overwintered here are still hanging around waiting to go off for the summer. So there's a lot of wildlife here at the moment in the mudflats around the harbour. And also, because the harbour is covered, it has headland all the way around. It's not very exposed to the open sea, which is just the other side of Brownsea Island. That means that there aren't many waves here. The sea is quite, the water is quite calm, and that means that the oil won't get a chance to wash away. So that is the worry, that it's going to have a devastating impact on wildlife. Well, earlier on, I spoke to Jim Stewart from the Harbour Commissioners. This is what he had to say.
So it's a relatively low risk for individuals. We have advised people not to use the harbour for recreational swimming or recreational purposes until further notice. There is then potential risk for the environment, which is, Poole Harbour is an incredibly sensitive area. SSSI, SPA, Ramsar sites. So that's what we've got the team out at the moment, looking through the harbour. We've got 4 teams, helicopters, drones, boats, to try and identify any particular oil spills, areas that need to be addressed.
Well, residents are particularly concerned, not only because there's a shellfishing industry here, but of course there's the tourism industry, people using the water constantly for swimming, for boating, for canoeing, for kayaking, and all sorts. They've been told to stay out of the water for the moment. A general sense in Poole today that this isn't the first time this has happened. Of course, last summer there were all sorts of stories of sewage being washed out into the sea, and now oil. So a demonstration is planned for later on this afternoon, when people are going to be telling the harbour masters they really have had enough.
Yeah, Jeff Moody, they're bringing us the latest from, frankly, what could turn out to be a pretty devastating incident, that, I think, in Poole. It is believed there that around 200 barrels of fluid, including oil, has now leaked out into, well, a natural habitat there. One would imagine it's going to have a devastating impact on wildlife, as well as, of course, personal public enjoyment of swimming in the area, etc. Look, I just want to delve into the inbox quickly. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Loads of you getting in touch with our top story of the day, which is that Scotland has a new leader of the SNP, soon to be, not quite yet, but soon to be a new First Minister, and that person is Humza Yousaf. Cracking email, this one, though, from David, who said that Humza Yousaf has won by 52% to 48%. Surely, if the history is anything to go by, that means that the Scottish people should demand a people's vote to confirm the result. Yes, we have had quite enough of that margin of victory, haven't we, in this country, following on from the Brexit debate. And Brian has said he's Humza useless. He's going to be in charge now, and it's the end of the SNP, alluding to the fact that Humza Yousaf has actually been relatively useless in previous positions of power that he's had. Look, what do you make of it all, ladies and gents? We're going to be touching on this throughout the course of this show. I'm also going to be going live to the House of Commons as and when some of the big hitters stand up, because there's a big debate taking place on the illegal migration bill. There was talk of a massive Conservative Party rebellion when it came to the illegal migration bill, potentially actually led by our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, but that seems to have quietened down somewhat. But when I do come back, would you believe that you might soon need to have 7 recycling bins? Yeah, that's right, 7 recycling bins. Absolute utter madness. And also, as well, find out why some people have been vandalising the old ULEZ cameras. People have had enough. People have had enough. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. Now, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has announced a big crackdown on antisocial behaviour. So Sunak promised to tackle what he called the scourge of drugs. There will be increased policing in areas of England and Wales deemed to have high amounts of low-level crime. We can take a look now at some of the Prime Minister's plans. So here we go. There will be a ban on nitrous oxide. So this is laughing gas, OK? Those little silver canisters that you might see littered around the place. He's going to clamp down on that. Police will get new powers to drug test people when they're arrested, presumably not for laughing gas, but for other things as well. And beggars will be targeted. That's right. So it will be made an offence for criminal gangs to organise begging. That one will be controversial. We're going to debate that later in the show, actually. Offenders will be made to wear high-vis vests or jumpsuits as they pick up litter, remove graffiti and wash police cars as part of community payback. I quite like that one. I think that's quite good fun, actually. And fines for fly tipping. Good, good. Graffiti and littering will also be increased to £1,000. Can I just raise with that? I mean, have people necessarily got the money to pay that? I don't know. Anyway, joining me now is Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, and Darren joins me, I believe. Yes, there he is. So, Rishi Sunak getting tough on low-level crime.
Yeah, tough on the causes of crime and tough on low-level crime, as you said. Patrick, with this range of initiatives announced today, the eye-catching one and clearly the one around laughing gas. So the focus, it must be said, of his speech was about the litter that one might find in parks or in public areas, and it does seem that seems the main motivation to stop people using this. It must be said already, though, it is a crime actually to sell those canisters to people for recreational use. This will now criminalise the person who decides to use them. In the end, though, this actually has got cross-party support. It's something the Labour Party came out a couple of months ago and said should happen. Why is the Prime Minister doing this? Well, he would argue that this is the third biggest kind of drug, if you like, for young people, that it bleeds into other societal problems, not least of all bigger crimes. It's kind of the broken window scenario. If you focus on the small stuff, you'll sort out the big stuff. Though drugs charities argue it's not a good idea, because ultimately in the end what it'll do is it'll just drive people towards criminal gangs. I think the big question, though, for the Prime Minister today, Patrick, all in all, is yes, of course, antisocial behaviour is a scourge. Of course, everyone wants to see it sorted. But given the fact that conviction rates for crimes are at an all-time low in this country, only around 6 or 7%. Many would suggest maybe the police, maybe the government should be focusing on things like burglary, assault, rape and murder, rather than things that are a nuisance, rather than the kind of big problems, the big crimes in our society.
Yeah, Darren, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor, bringing you the latest as Rishi Sunak looks to get really tough on quite low-level crimes. Look, I think fly tipping is absolutely moronic, isn't it, and a complete nuisance. I get that. I think a lot of people's problem with the laughing gas stuff is that the people leave the canisters around. I'm not sure how many people are that bothered about this so-called hippie crack and people actually using it, and I don't know whether criminalising that is going to do much for it. I do like the idea, I don't know about you, though, I do like the idea of people who are found guilty of graffiti and just messing up the local area, essentially being made to clean it up while wearing a big high-vis jacket that says something like "I'm a moron" on it. But there we go, maybe I could wear one of those on a daily basis. But we're moving on now. Let's get reaction to today's announcement. I am joined by the Conservative MP, Kieran Mullen. Kieran, thank you very much. Now, what do you make of this? The criticism would be that actually this is doing nothing to tackle really big, serious crime, and that is the stuff that people are most worried about.
Well, thanks for having me. And I welcome the announcements today because these are the types of things that we hear a lot of as constituency MPs in Crewe and Nantwich. I hear about these types of problems, whether it is the canisters being left around, whether it's fly tipping, littering. These are things that fill MPs' inboxes, and we feed that back to the government. I'm really glad to see that the government's listened on this. And I don't think it's a matter of either or, that we can't look at the more serious crimes if we have a focus on the kinds of the challenges we're talking about today. We are doing what we can to tackle that reduction in prosecutions and the time it's taken to be seen in court. You have to remember, we had our courts almost entirely closed during the pandemic, and we did quite well to keep them open for as long as we did, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been a big backlog, and the government's doing what it can to get that backlog down and get prosecutions speeding along, but it's a challenging thing for people to deal with.
Yeah, now, clearly, people are going to jump all over the begging angle of it and say that it makes Tories look like really nasty people, that you've got people lining the streets with absolutely nothing, sticking their hand out, asking for a bit of loose change or a bit of food for someone who walks by, and the Tories essentially want to round them up and move them on. What are you actually planning on doing with beggars?
Well, I think people understand the difference between a genuine person who has got no choice but to be begging, though, I would say there are always support services available to people locally. The challenge is often getting the right service for someone in their circumstances. But what we're talking about here is, as described, is organised criminal gangs that, they're either taking advantage of a vulnerable person and getting them to beg and then taking the proceeds off them, or actually they're just putting it on in the first place. I'm afraid we all have heard of examples in our constituencies of people who are, it's organised. It's a way of getting money off people. It's not because someone's actually desperate, and they might be using that money for drug use, either for themselves or, as I said, feeding it into a criminal gang.
Yeah, no, look, absolutely. I mean, I can think of massive examples of it from when I was growing up, and also when I just drive around London at the moment, and you can see people who are, unfortunately, it's a horrible thing to say, but it's true. You can just see that they are actually putting it on a bit, and people hanging around at traffic lights, etc. So I think, yeah. Now, this is essentially, I think, in a nutshell, the Tories trying to clamp down on things that most people just find a nuisance in day-to-day life, don't they? So your fly tipping, your graffiti, people begging maybe when they shouldn't be necessarily doing so, etc. Do you think this is actually a massive vote winner?
Yeah, but I think you're underestimating the impact that smaller stuff can have. So I'll use the example where we get a lot of this in my constituency, is the town of Crewe, and people occupying the space to do that sort of thing. It isn't just about the impact that behaviour has. It means other people don't feel they can use those spaces. So I've had a recent issue where there's been people gathering to drink in gangs at a bus stop. And actually, if you're an elderly lady travelling on your own, you don't want to sit at a bus stop with people in the middle of the day who are drinking. So it's not just about that bad behaviour in itself, but the fact it excludes other people from those shared public spaces. It's the same with local play parks. Very often people won't go because they're fed up of the smell of weed there. They don't know what trouble they may well get into if they turn up. So it's got a dual purpose.
Absolutely. Look, Kieran, thank you. And can I, yet again, apologise for my behaviour at your local bus stop? There's Kieran Mullen there, who's Conservative MP for Crewe and Nantwich. Just whizzing you through the Tories trying to get tough on low-level crime, but it does have an impact, though, doesn't it? Right, now, have the bin men ever refused to take your bins out because you got the waste management wrong? There was one example which really wound me up, actually, involving my grandma and some flowers in the recycling bin because her garden bin was shut because of the ice and she couldn't open it up, and they refused to take it. Anyway, enough of my personal issues. It's possibly about to get a whole lot stricter, though. OK, so the government are exploring new plans where households could need as many as 7 bins for new waste collection rules. The plans are due to be made public in a couple of weeks. There's a chance local authorities might have to collect your glass, paper, metal and plastic separately, as well as general rubbish, as well as separate bins for food and garden waste. Just FYI, this could cost you around £3 billion. I'm joined now by Sam Hall, Director of the Conservative Environment Network. Sam, this is madness.
So I think what DEFRA's proposing here and what's gone through in the Environment Act, which Parliament passed a couple of years ago, is setting consistent standards for different types of materials to be recycled through our household waste collection. It's making sure that the recycling system at the moment, which is this patchwork across the country, 350 different types of standards that different councils have around the types of materials that are being recycled. It's just one common set of standards across the UK, and it's going to make it much easier and much simpler for households to recycle, to do their bit for the environment. It's going to mean less
7 bins.
landfill.
How's it going to make it much simpler? It's going to cost, anyway, it's going to do, it's going to cost around £465 million a year for 7 years, which raises that total to £3.25 billion. And what is going to happen if you've got a woman who's in her 80s, or a man for that matter, who's just used to just normally putting the bins out, who might not have the capacity to sift through every bit of rubbish? Do they get clobbered with a fine for putting a tin in the garden bin by mistake or something?
No, they shouldn't get clobbered with a fine. The reason it's simpler is because it's getting rid of this regional variation that as you move from one bit of the country to the next, the way in which you recycle, what you can recycle changes. So that's how it's going to be made simple. And I think, one thing the department has already said is that they're not necessarily going to mandate that councils have to have separate bins for each of these waste streams. Councils will collect several different types of waste streams in one single collection and then separate themselves in the depot. But at the moment, lots of recycling that people do gets wasted because the different materials get contaminated with different types of material not being able to be separated. What this will do will mean that more of the recycling that we put in our recycling bins can actually be used as valuable feedstock, and we don't have to take as much raw material from the environment, which causes extra emissions and extra damage to the natural environment.
OK, all right, I've got to ask, what are these new bins going to be made out of?
I think, good question. I don't know. I think
probably plastic, isn't it?
The rules themselves are making sure that the standards themselves are consistent. And, I think longer term, this should mean that, rather than councils having to separately design and manage all these different systems, there can just be one across the country. I think, yes, there'll be a transition. And of course, the government should make it as simple and as easy as possible for councillors and individuals to comply with. But I think it's a step in the right direction and will make it much simpler overall.
Look, Sam, thank you very much for putting up the good fight. Sam Hall there, Director of the Conservative Environment Network. But, I can see the optics of it, ladies and gents. I don't know about you. I was spending £3 billion over the 7 years and just ending up with more plastic outside your house in the form of bins. But there we are. Sadiq Khan, though, is planning to expand ULEZ zone in London. So this is the ultra-low emission zone. By the way, this isn't just a London-centric story, because this is coming to a town and a city near you. And by the end of August, it will cover all 32 London boroughs rather than just the centre. So it means vehicles which are not meeting the European emissions standard will have to pay £12.50 for every day they use their car within London. For a little bit of context on this, ladies and gentlemen, again, don't want to over-personalise this, but every time I move my car off my driveway, I would pay £12.50, OK? So that's quite an extensive charge, isn't it? Now, of course, not everybody is happy about this. Yep. And some have shown their displeasure by covering up their ULEZ cameras with boxes and bin bags. And I think it's fantastic, although, of course, we don't condone civil disobedience. Gareth Bacon, who's the MP for Orpington, joins me now. Gareth, you've been out protesting against the ULEZ expansion this morning. What do you make of the fact that the public have quite clearly had enough of this nonsense?
Well, I don't blame them. You see, there's no legitimacy for what the Mayor is trying to do, because it wasn't in his manifesto when he went to the polls less than 2 years ago. There was overwhelming opposition to it when he did his consultation, and he said that if there was overwhelming opposition, he wouldn't implement it. It's not really about air quality. We know that, because as part of the consultation, he had to come up with an independent...
Carry on. Sorry, you were interrupted by clips of a protester there. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I think that was Orpington on Saturday. We know that it's not about air quality, because as part of the consultation, he had to produce, or get an independent company to produce a report examining the impact of expanding the zone. And they came back and said it would have a minor to negligible impact. So what he's looking to do here is to massively impose a restriction on people's standard of living for no reason whatsoever other than to raise money. So I'm not surprised that people have had enough.
But the idea that there was some kind of public consultation, it's important to drill down on this, because, as I've said, this is probably going to come to a town or a city near you at home, ladies and gentlemen. So this wasn't in his manifesto, so people didn't get to vote on it. There hasn't been a public vote on it since. No. My understanding is that he said that there was going to be some kind of public consultation, but he'd already ordered the cameras that he would need. So the taxpayer had already paid for it. So a public consultation was basically pointless. Is that right?
Yes, that seems to be correct. So he did do the consultation. He tried to suppress the results, but was forced to release them. In the consultation itself, he tried to ignore certain responses. I think it was Fairfuel UK had sent out a pro forma for people to top and tail, which they did, over 5,000 people. And that was apparently treated as one response rather than 5,000 responses, although environmental groups did something very similar, and he counted each of their responses individually. But despite all of this, over 60% of people said no, 70% of Outer Londoners said no, and 80% of Outer London businesses said no. Then it turned out that halfway through the consultation process, he'd been interfering with it and sending targeted mailing to people and online advertising to try to get certain groups he thought would support the ULEZ to try to respond to the consultation. And as you've just said, he'd already bought the cameras.
So I've got to ask you quickly, because we're a bit pressed for time, that you're saying this isn't going to have a massive environmental impact. Can you prove that? And secondly, is it just about raising money? Is that just what this is then for you?
Yeah, it is. That's completely what it's about. I don't have to prove it because his own report that was produced independently by Jacobs tells you that. They've done all their own analysis and they said it would have a minor to negligible impact. Okay. So, of course, this is all about just raising money because TfL's got a big black hole in its finances. And that's what he's doing.
And it's worth noting as well, ladies and gentlemen at home, that a lot of this money is going to come from the people who can least afford it, because the people who can't afford electric cars, who can't afford a new car, and people who are out there just trying to earn a crust in a van, you know, a painted decorator, etc. Look, Gareth, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Gareth Bacon there, MP for Orpington. Right, what an hour that was. I've got another one coming your way in just a couple of minutes. The SNP has a new leader. It's Humza Yousaf, and he says he's the luckiest man in the world. How do you feel? Anyway, he's replacing Nicola Sturgeon. It's a big day in the Commons as well. Big day in the House of Commons. There's an illegal migration bill. It's being debated. We were anticipating a widespread Tory rebellion and rumblings as well that the actual Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, was behind that. I'll bring you the very latest as and when we get it, including live shots from the House of Commons. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News. Stay tuned.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 o'clock. I'm Patrick Christys, and I'm going to send you straight over to the House of Commons now because Suella Braverman has taken to the floor commenting on the illegal migration bill. Let's go.
Like you don't feel like you belong. It does affect your emotional well-being. You don't feel safe. You don't know what's going to happen next. I felt like this for 3 years since I've lived here, and I've been planning on leaving for the past year. Such sentiments are why my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has made tackling antisocial behaviour a top priority for this government. Our antisocial behaviour action plan will give police and crime commissioners, local authorities and other agencies the tools to stamp out antisocial behaviour across England and Wales. It targets the callous and careless few whose actions ruin the public spaces and amenities that the law-abiding majority depend upon. Our plan outlines a radical new approach to tackling antisocial behaviour, split across 4 key areas. Firstly, stronger punishment for perpetrators. We're cracking down on illegal drugs, making offenders repair the damage they cause, increasing financial penalties and evicting antisocial tenants. Now, the benches opposite, Madam Deputy Speaker, can't seem to make up their mind on whether they want to legalise drugs or not. While the Leader of the Opposition and the Mayor of London argue about cannabis decriminalisation, we're getting on with delivering for the public. Madam Deputy Speaker, drugs are harmful to health, well-being and security. They devastate lives. That is why I have taken the decision to ban nitrous oxide. Also known as laughing gas, this is currently the third most used drugs for adults and 16 to 24-year-olds. By doing so, this government will put an end to hordes of youths loitering in and littering parks with empty canisters. Furthermore, under our new plan, the police will be able to drug test suspected criminals in police custody for a wider range of drugs, including ecstasy and methamphetamine. They will test offenders linked to crimes like violence against women and girls, serious violence, and antisocial behaviour. And we will ensure that the consequences of those committing ASB are toughened up. Our immediate justice pilots will deliver swift, visible punishment for all those involved. Offenders will undertake manual reparative work that makes good the damage suffered by victims. Communities will be consulted on the type of work undertaken. That work should start swiftly, ideally within 48 hours of a notice from the police. And so whether it's cleaning up graffiti, picking up litter, washing the police cars whilst wearing high-vis jumpsuits or vests, those caught behaving antisocially will feel the full force of the law. The upper limits of on-the-spot fines will be increased to £1,000 for fly tipping and £500 for litter and graffiti. We will support councils to hand out more fines to offenders, with councils keeping the money to reinvest in clean-up and enforcement. Now, Mr. Speaker, nobody should have to endure persistent antisocial behaviour from their neighbours. Madam Deputy Speaker, apologies. That's why we plan to halve the delay between a private landlord serving notice for antisocial behaviour and eviction. We'll also broaden the harmful activities that can lead to eviction and make sure that antisocial offenders are deprioritised for social housing. Secondly, we're making communities safer by increasing police presence in antisocial behaviour hotspots and replacing the outdated Vagrancy Act. Now, the evidence is compelling, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hotspot policing, where uniformed police spend regular time in problem areas, reduces crime. That's why we are funding an increased police presence focused on antisocial behaviour in targeted hotspots where it is most prevalent. We will support pilots in 10 trailblazer areas before rolling out hotspot enforcement across all forces in England and Wales in 2024. And we're replacing the 19th century Vagrancy Act, which criminalised the destitute, with tools to direct vulnerable individuals towards appropriate support, such as accommodation, mental health or substance misuse services. We will criminalise organised begging, which is often facilitated by criminal gangs to obtain cash for illicit activity. We will prohibit begging where it causes blight or public nuisance, such as by a cash point or in a shop doorway or directly approaching someone in the street. Now, rough sleeping can cause distress to other members of the community, for example, by obstructing the entrance of a local business or leaving behind debris and tents. So we will give police and local authorities the tools that they've asked for to deal with such situations, while ensuring that those who are genuinely homeless are directed towards appropriate help. And we'll build local pride in place by giving councils stronger tools to revitalise communities, bring more empty high street shops back into use and restore local parks. Thirdly, prevention and intervention. Around 80% of prolific adult offenders begin committing crimes as children. We're funding 1 million more hours of provision for young people in antisocial behaviour hotspots. We're expanding eligibility for the turnaround programme, which will support 17,000 children on the cusp of the criminal justice system. And our £500 million National Youth Guarantee means that by 2025, every young person will have access to regular clubs, activities and opportunities to volunteer. And fourth, improving accountability to the public. A new digital tool will mean members of the public have a simple and clear way to report antisocial behaviour and receive updates on their case. We're also launching a targeted consultation on community safety partnerships with the aim of making them more accountable and more effective. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is on the side of the law-abiding majority. We will take the fight to the antisocial minority. This government has set out a clear plan and a clear set of measures to do just this. More police, less crime, safer streets and common sense policing. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Right, well, there we go. So that was Suella Braverman in the House of Commons there. She's talking about the Conservatives' plans to clamp down on antisocial behaviour. Let us know what you think about all of that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Just to summarise, really, what she's saying is that the Conservative Party wants to get to grips with what's going on in local communities, and that means things like begging where it's a blight or a nuisance, and, of course, the organised crime gangs behind begging, so not wanting to be too harsh on genuine homeless people, it would seem, who just want to, try and get a few quid, etc. Also things like graffiti, fly tipping, and really community action, direct community action. So one of the big ones that stood out for me was a little bit of shaming, a little bit of public shaming. So people who commit low-level crimes in an area, like your graffitiing and your fly tipping, etc., be made to do community service whilst wearing high-vis vests, so anyone who walks past them, and that fine of £1,000. Now, the fine of £1,000 I'm a little bit dubious about, because I would have thought that if someone was fly tipping or, maybe the kind of person who goes out graffitiing, have they got £1,000 to just pay? I'm not sure they do, but I suppose it is a deterrent, isn't it? But what do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? gbviews@gbnews.uk. The criticism, the obvious criticisms to it are you shouldn't be criminalising people who are already destitute, i.e. beggars. Some people will disagree with that. And, of course, as well, are they doing enough to tackle, quotes-unquote, real top-level crimes? So rapes, murders, burglaries. Would people rather they did that? Interesting that Suella Braverman there finished on saying there's going to be more police to deal with these crimes. Again, the obvious pushback to that would be that the numbers of police in the UK had fallen under the Conservatives to begin with. Are they now just trying to replace those? The Tories are clearly trying to desperately claim back that they are the party of law and order. Do you buy what they're selling? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But we are moving on now to the SNP, who've elected Humza Yousaf as their new leader. Yousaf replaced Nicola Sturgeon, who resigned after 8 years as Scotland's First Minister. He won the leadership contest ahead of Kate Forbes and Ash Regan, and is Scotland's first leader from an ethnic minority background. Let's play the clip.
And just as I will lead the SNP in the interests of all party members, not just those who voted for me, so I will aim to lead Scotland in the interests of all of our citizens, whatever your political allegiance. If elected as your First Minister after tomorrow's vote in Parliament, know that I will be a First Minister for all of Scotland, that I will work every minute of every day to earn and to re-earn your respect and your trust. I will do that by treating you, the people of Scotland, with respect. There will be no empty promises or easy sound bites when the issues in front of us are difficult and complex, because government is not easy, and I won't pretend that it is.
Yes, well, he's got a big job on his hands, and actually the result there was fascinating, because Humza Yousaf beat Kate Forbes by 52% to 48%, which we all know those infamous numbers are etched into every British individual's retina, aren't they, after the old Brexit vote? So it was not the resounding victory that many were predicting for Humza Yousaf, and his track record is again coming into the spotlight, isn't it, as Transport Minister, as Health Secretary as well, Justice. Anyway, let's go to Edinburgh now and join GB News' Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, was it a jubilant atmosphere where you were when Humza Yousaf was announced as First Minister? What was going on? Or SNP leader, I should say.
Well, certainly, I'm glad you caught some of that audio there. Humza Yousaf, certainly a hit from the toddlers in the audience who seem to be giving him quite a cheer throughout his speech. I would say that, as expected, with it being so close between it, I wouldn't say it was even as close as some people thought it may have been when it was between the three. But with the second preference votes from Ash Regan getting divided between the other two candidates, I think a lot of people were expecting that to be quite tense, really up until the words came out of their mouths. It could have gone either way, and it's certainly down to, you know, quite a comeback, really, from Kate Forbes over the last few weeks. But one way or another, you know, Humza Yousaf has won. He had the majority of the votes, and certainly now you've heard in his speech there that his priority now is just being open and frank and honest and transparent. And again, that's something we've heard really all the way from last weekend, where we had 3 resignations back to back from the upper echelons of the SNP. This week's set to be quite exciting. It's not over yet, as they say. Certainly the Scottish rugby team, who obviously play in Murrayfield behind me, all the last year they had a campaign slogan called As One, and that is very much what Humza Yousaf is going to have to do first and foremost over the coming weeks. And we'll find out tomorrow who is made First Minister.
Well, there we go. All right, look, Tony, thank you very much. Tony Maguire there, GB News' Scotland reporter. So Humza Yousaf is obviously rather happy about the whole thing. I've been asking you what you think, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Less happy, it's fair to say, in the inbox, although the only points of jubilation are that a lot of people think that it might be the end of the SNP and an M for independence. I am going to whiz you through some tweets from some political big hitters now, so their reaction to it. We've got the outgoing SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon. She's already given her backing to her replacement. She tweeted, "I pay tribute to all 3 candidates for the SNP leadership for rising to the challenge. Most of all, I congratulate Humza Yousaf and wish him every success. He will be an outstanding leader and First Minister, and I could not be prouder to have him succeed me." Now, the Scottish Labour leader, Anas Sarwar, who many are tipping to be the big winner out of all of this, actually. Humza Yousaf might have won the race to be the SNP leader, but it's questionable, really, whether the big winner here is indeed Labour and Anas Sarwar. He's congratulated Yousaf, but he went on to say that Yousaf is taking over a chaotic and divided party that's out of touch and out of ideas. And I can't help but feel he's right about that. The theory is that plenty of people will now switch their allegiance from the SNP to the Labour Party. Labour could pick up a lot of seats north of the border, and that could lead to Keir Starmer wandering into Downing Street to the next general election. Still time to go, though, and this man, Douglas Ross, will be doing his best to stave off a red wall north of the border. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives added his congratulations, but he said that his party had serious concerns about Yousaf's ability to deliver for the people of Scotland, and those concerns centre around, frankly, Humza Yousaf's track record, when, of course, he was Transport Minister and was found driving his mate's car without insurance, and his record, or lack of record, I should say, as the Health Minister, and a few other bits and bobs as well. Some personal issues when it comes to attempting to essentially question whether or not his child was allowed to enter a nursery school or not allowed to enter a nursery school because of their race, when it turned out that there was nothing to do with that. That was all a little bit rum, if you ask me. But get your views coming in, because it is a big day in Scottish politics. I think a sense that it's the end of an era and the start of a new one, and what will it really mean for Scottish independence and at the ballot box at the next election? But it is a significant day here in Westminster, where MPs are debating the illegal migration bill. Now, it was thought that Rishi Sunak was facing the biggest rebellion since he became Prime Minister. But there's an update on that coming up in just a moment. Earlier today, Sunak and Suella Braverman, well, they were heckled. So Tory MPs were basically saying, we don't think this bill goes far enough. Some Tory MPs, so you don't go far enough. We want you to be tougher on illegal migration. That's where the point of rebellion was supposed to be coming from. But then Rishi and Suella went for a little stroll around Chelmsford earlier and got a very different take from a very shouty woman.
Migrants into this country! Go away! We don't want you here!
So we don't want you here, we want you to allow migrants into the country, was the gist of that. I'm joined now by our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. Now, at the top of the hour, we had Suella Braverman in the Commons talking about crime, antisocial behaviour, law and order. there is another big development taking place in the Commons later, we hope, which is about the illegal migration bill. Just run us through what the point of contention is here, because we were thinking there was going to be a big rebellion.
We were. Up to 50 or maybe even 60 Conservative MPs were said to be thinking about pushing amendments to essentially cut out the role of the courts. And they seem to have been talked down for the time being by the Prime Minister and his aides on the grounds that they run the risk, if they do that, of scuppering the whole bill, because after it's gone through the Commons, it's going to have a really rough time in the House of Lords anyway. Lots of people think that it's too tough already. And basically, the message is, don't rock the boat at the moment, let's get this through. I think the feeling is the government think it's tough enough. Indeed, Rishi Sunak saying it's a tough piece of legislation, the likes of which we've never seen. They believe that this will have the impact that they want without pressing that nuclear option of basically ignoring the ECHR. And they might have to revisit that, of course, if the existing legislation doesn't have the desired effect.
Which is fascinating, because the noises earlier were there's Suella Braverman herself, so the actual Home Secretary, might be wanting more from this and might have been in favour of the people rebelling.
Yes, reports that Suella Braverman was actively encouraging this because she actually personally wanted it toughened up herself. Of course, that's been completely denied, so who knows? But the messaging now is that, no, they're not going to ignore the courts. And, of course, there's also plenty of Conservative MPs on the left of the party that aren't happy about this bill either, because they think it's too tough. So they are wanting these safe, legal routes to be brought in. Now, again, Rishi Sunak saying, we do want to bring those routes in, but we need to get the numbers down first.
So we're going to have 2 days of debate on this, are we? And then a vote. Just run me through how we're expecting this to go.
So it's at committee stage now. We had the first and second reading. The government are rushing this through. 2 days of debate, supposedly, but it's now, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, and they haven't even started. But sometime today and then tomorrow. Then it potentially has its third reading, and then it will go to the House of Lords. So the government are desperate to rush this through to get it onto the statute books ASAP, so that they can start, they hope, putting people on flights and sending them to Rwanda.
OK, good stuff. Look, thank you very, very much. Catherine Forster there, our political reporter, just bringing you up to date. Like I've said, I've been saying throughout, as and when we do get to this discussion and debate in the House of Commons, we'll be taking you some of the big hitters there, so what they've got to say. But I'm joined by a big hitter now, right here on the show. Conservative MP Craig McKinley joins me. Craig, look, thank you very much. I've got to be honest with you, I think a lot of people like me will be scratching their heads and wondering how on earth, without any amendments to this bill, it would seem, so many staunch Tory MPs who want to see flights take off to Rwanda have been placated just by a question of trust. What's going on? No rebellion?
Well, we do trust Suella. We trust her implicitly on this issue, that this is the legislation that's going to get things solved. I know we've spoken about that for a long time. We had Priti Patel's bill, the Nationality and Borders bill last year, meant to be the salvation to everything. It didn't work because we always have this knotty problem of the ECHR as part of the ladder of judicial activity in trying to manage our borders and immigration system. Now, the amendments that I don't know if you call them the troublemakers or the good-uns. I'm probably one of the, whichever side you think I'm on. I support those amendments because we need to have legislation that we agree with by this Parliament, by the majority of people in this country. And if the ECHR are being troublesome towards that endeavour to, let's not forget, save lives by stopping this illegal crossings, then that is what...
Oh, I think we might have lost Craig there. That's a real shame, actually. Hopefully we can get Craig back on, because as far as I understand it, then they're going to kind of ignore a lot of these amendments anyway, which does lead me up to wondering what on earth is going on when it comes to the idea that they can actually manage to run roughshod over the ECHR. What's the key point of difference there? That was Conservative MP Craig McKinley, who is back, yes. Back by popular demand. Craig, yes, good stuff. So, Craig, sorry, what's changed there? What's changed, Craig? I don't understand how the other pieces of legislation didn't work and there was a fly in the ointment when it's come to the ECHR. But this one, is different. Why?
Well, I mean, we're hoping it's going to be different because the duty on the Home Secretary is different. The duty under this legislation, unamended, the government's legislation, before any other amendments are considered, is that the Home Secretary has a duty to deport. That is the primary duty. And there has to be a good reason if it's the other way around. So we're in a 180-degree different place from where we've currently been with our borders and immigration rules and legislation up to now. So that's very, very different. Now, what is very much in scope here is this rather peculiar Rule 39 procedure that I think we discussed before, where we apply a lot of them. Britain applies 80% of those Rule 39 judgments, which are done by a solo judge, name unknown, late at night in Strasbourg, just based on paper, no oral hearing. And yet we comply with 80% of those judgments. Germany only 60% and Spain only 40%. So it seems to me there's a fair bit of discretion and latitude as to how much these are to be adhered.
Surely, can I just interrupt? Surely, then, reading between the lines is what you appear to be saying to me is that you've got assurances from our Home Secretary that she's going to ignore those.
Well, no, I've not had a one-to-one with her today, so I don't know what her thinking is today. But I have been discussing with some of those who put the amendments forward, and I have signed. And everybody's feeling fairly, I say, buoyant that things are going to move in the right direction. Because I mean, this isn't about using, say, the Rwanda scheme. This is about a deterrent effect. So people will not take the movement off a French beach, and there's an issue in itself. Why can't the beaches be properly patrolled in France? But this is meant to be a deterrent effect to stop people from even thinking of coming here in the first place, because your processing will be rapid, and one of those choices may be you being transported to Rwanda to pursue your claim there. Now, that is meant to have a deterrent effect to stop people from even considering spending the money, risking their lives, and making a trade which is more lucrative than the drugs trade. That is fundamentally what this is all about. And we obviously worry, because we've been here before, will the ECHR then put its boots in and say, yes, all very well, you've got primary legislation supported by your population, supported by MPs, but we know better, thanks very much. That is the dynamic of the issue that we've been facing for a considerable time.
Can you just clear something up for me, Craig? Because I think we are getting a bit of mixed messaging over this, depending on who we talk to. Are you guys still thinking of putting forward an amendment that would mean that we just didn't really listen to the ECHR? Or are you willing to not put that amendment forward and just go off trust from what the Home Secretary is saying, just to get this bill through as quickly as possible?
Well, there's always parliamentary games go on here, of course. You've got the discretion of the Speaker as to whether various amendments, whether whoever thinks they're good, bad or indifferent, whoever signs them always thinks they're a good one, always would. But it's up to the Speaker to actually accept that amendment as being in scope and relevant. So a lot of discretion there. And then you've got the lead member who's actually put it forward, seeking signatures like mine on it, to actually then push it at the appropriate time, if it had been accepted by the Speaker. So there's, a few ifs and buts on the way. But as you know, the parliamentary games often are, if you've heard enough from the minister that satisfies the ambitions that amendment is trying to solve, then it may not be pushed. I mean, that's just regular practice, whether we like it or not.
But this is the rebellion, though, isn't it? This is where the rebellion would be. It's on that issue of the ECHR, and one would imagine the Speaker would have to call it, because there is a direct relevance to it. I mean, it is the fundamental issue that underpins all of this. So, are you telling me that realistically you don't expect the Speaker to call it because behind the scenes they're aware that essentially you guys are withdrawing it and you're going to wave it through as it is?
No, I don't know about any of those shenanigans that may not gone on. I actually think the Speaker does do things on their own volition. They don't listen to party managers. But you would imagine that a Speaker, I know what I would do if I was a Speaker, I would be looking for some vaguely troublesome amendments so we can have a lively debate in the House. But I'm not entirely sure that's the way that it works. But, the whys and wherefores and the discretion of a Speaker is a stuff of some magic and majesty that is beyond what I fully understand, shall we say, Patrick.
OK, all right, look, just very finally, very quickly, look, do you, in your heart of hearts, do you expect this to go through as it is without any massive backlash from the backbenchers? Because it does appear that some voodoo magic has taken place and that you guys are keen to go off a lot of trust here and not add too many amendments. Do you realistically think that that's what's going to happen?
Well, I think the bill as it stands has got some great strength. We've identified some weaknesses in it that would benefit from some strengthening up, particularly on the role of the ECHR. Now, I'm sure that if we do not hear enough on what we're going to do about the ECHR, then I expect these amendments will be pushed.
Right.
But I mean, there's no guarantee even then that they will go through Parliament, obviously, because Labour will vote against them because it seems to me they want open borders, and we've been discussing that for a long time. Whatever we've done, whether it's Rwanda, whatever other policy, strengthening and returns policies, they're always against it. So we can't rely on Labour to have any common sense on matters relating to the borders of the UK. I think.
But we do know that Suella Braverman, it appears, is pretty keen on getting us out the ECHR, and if this bill is not strong enough on that, would you expect her to resign over it?
No, we're nowhere near that sort of territory. I mean, we've discussed ECHR before. How is it in the UK? We accept 76% of all applicants for asylum, and yet the EU average is 16%. The same 1951 convention, the same ECHR. There's something else going on here, and I think there is a degree of different interpretation by our judicial system from that goes on in Spain and Germany and elsewhere. But we have got some positivity thus far on the Albanian issue. The Albanian Prime Minister was over with the PM just last week, and I do understand the numbers of Albanians on boats has literally fallen off a cliff so far this year on the back of those deals.
All right. Craig, much appreciated as ever. Thank you very, very much for, well, in some ways, clearing things up, I think. As Conservative MP Craig McKinley there. Well, reading between the lines there, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be keen to know what you made of that. I think it does appear as though there's been some quite strong words behind the scenes. We're not anticipating a massive backbench Tory rebellion on this. And if the noises are correct and they feel as though that we're going to circumvent the ECHR, we're either going to ignore it and get deportations off the ground, and that appears to be the political will. And if we've found some kind of clever legal way of doing that, then it would appear to me that this is just going to get waved through. What do you make of it? gbviews@gbnews.uk. I know a lot of people will feel like they've been burnt before. If there's trust involved here, they feel like they've been burnt before. But we're moving on because Prince Harry is in court today. No, not for that. He is suing the publisher of the Daily Mail. I'm Patrick Christys, and find out more next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back, everybody. I've got loads more coming your way. We are going to focus in on Rishi Sunak's plans to crack down on anti-social behaviour, getting tough on begging, on graffiti, on fly tipping, all of that. What do you make of that? And I like the idea of naming and shaming people, essentially, by making them wear high-vis vests to clear up their mess. Also, the latest on the oil leak in Poole Harbour that's been declared now as a major incident. And as well, I'm going to be talking to you about Prince Harry is in court, and we've got a Grooming Gangs exclusive coming your way very shortly, so make sure you stay tuned for that. I've got your headlines now, though, with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. The top stories this hour. Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party. Scotland's Health Secretary claimed victory over Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan with 52% of the vote. Outgoing leader Nicola Sturgeon says he will be an outstanding successor. At 37, Mr Yousaf is set to become Scotland's youngest First Minister, and he's the first holder of the position to come from an ethnic minority background. Speaking at Murrayfields, he said he was honoured to be entrusted with the party leadership.
Not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as a leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, the opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life.
Humza Yousaf speaking there. Well, the Prime Minister says he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to anti-social behaviour. During a visit to Essex today, Rishi Sunak unveiled a £160 million scheme that will include forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their communities. The government plans to make laughing gas a Class C drug with nitrous oxide banned before the end of the year. And lawyers for the publishers of the Daily Mail newspaper say privacy claims brought by high-profile individuals, including Prince Harry, are stale and should be dismissed. The Duke of Sussex, who's at the High Court in London today, is among a group, including Sir Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, who are launching legal action against Associated Newspapers for unlawful information gathering. The newspaper group denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to place listening devices inside cars and homes and recording phone calls. Those are your latest news headlines. I'm back at 5. See you then.
Yes, well, I am picking up where Polly left off because Prince Harry has been at the High Court today at the start of legal proceedings involving alleged phone hacking involving the publishers of the Daily Mail. So the Duke of Sussex is among individuals including Elton John, Liz Hurley and Sadie Frost. And our TV viewers will be able to see Prince Harry rather ironically actually walking into a pap just outside the court there, so there we go. And they're suing Associated Newspapers. The Prince arrived with a security detail before bumping into that photographer outside the court building, and he was quickly ushered inside. Well, I can go now to our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who's been listening to the hearing and joins us from the court itself. Ellie, thank you very much. What you got for us?
Well, good afternoon to you, Patrick. I am sensing a bit of movement, actually, on my left-hand side. So if we do see Prince Harry come out of the court, I will, of course, bring that to you. It appears as though the police are moving on our left-hand side. It looks as though he's leaving from a side entrance, which is different to the way he entered the court this morning at 9:30, stepped out of a London black cab flanked by security and made his way through the front entrance of the Royal Courts of Justice. He's clearly a man that wants to be seen. We're not even in a trial stage of this case. We are only in the preliminary hearings, and we were told last night that none of the claimants would be appearing in court today. We were told it would simply be written submissions from the claimants, but it's been a total surprise to see Prince Harry not only in the UK but here at the Royal Courts of Justice. He sat in the courtroom for the entire day, and at lunchtime he was joined by Sir Elton John, who came through the side entrance. And Prince Harry sat at the back of the courtroom. He had a black notepad in front of him, and he was listening very intently to submissions from barristers on both sides, and he made notes as he went. The actress Sadie Frost was sat 2 seats along from him, just some of the high-profile claimants in this case. So clearly, Patrick, optics are very important to these claimants. They did not have to be here today, but they wanted to be seen because they want this case to go to a full trial. So what was said today? Well, they are accusing Associated Newspapers Limited, they are the publishers of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday and Mail Online, of major breaches of privacy, including alleged illegal information gathering. They speak about phone tapping, private investigators allegedly hiding microphones in their phones, in their homes and in their cars. In written submissions, we heard today how the actress Liz Hurley had her phone tapped, and a microphone was also put in Hugh Grant's car. So those are just some of the things that we're already hearing in court. Also, allegations of individuals being impersonated in order to obtain hospital records, also from private clinics as well, and the accessing of bank accounts and bank statements through illicit means and manipulation. Well, the barrister who is representing Prince Harry and Sir Elton John and the like said that these allegations range from a period from 1993 to 2011 and even all the way up to 2018. So this is certainly something that's been going on for a long time. He said that all 7 claimants have been victims of illegal acts. I have just been told that Prince Harry has just left the court, actually, via a side entrance, just to bring that to you. He's headed in that direction. There you go. So he decided not to come through the front door of the Royal Courts of Justice, despite deciding to enter in that way this morning, which is quite an interesting choice, isn't it? Where was I now? Coming back to this. Oh, Associated Newspapers, they have strongly denied any of these allegations. They've described them as preposterous smears, and they claim that this legal action being taken by the claimants and their lawyers is a fishing expedition. They also claim that it's too late to make these sorts of claims now, considering some of the articles in question are 30 years old. They used the word stale and said that this case needs to be thrown out. But I think it's clear to see, Patrick, that with Prince Harry and Sir Elton John and Sadie Frost all in the courtroom today, they want to see this case go to a full trial.
Well, Ellie, thank you very, very much. Ellie Costello there, our national reporter, just outside the courts, bringing you the latest. So Prince Harry has left the building, ladies and gentlemen, but through the side exit, not through the main entrance, of course, that he strolled through, bumping into a photographer as he did it. What do you make of that? Interesting, isn't it? So we weren't expecting him, we weren't expecting Elton John, we weren't expecting a couple of other high-profile people to actually be in court today. It's the preliminary hearing for it. Clearly trying to put pressure on to make sure that this does actually go to a full hearing. So there we go. GB Views at GBNews.uk. Interesting as well, he arrived in a black cab. Massive security concerns, really, Harry? But there we go. A survivor, though, moving on, a survivor from one of the grooming gang scandals has secured a landmark legal victory, suing her abuser for £425,000. GB News spoke with Liz, who hopes that her case will open the door for more survivors to fight for their own justice. Look, this is important. Here at GB News, we've been desperately trying to continue to highlight the grooming gang issues that are taking place right across the country. Massive, massive historical injustices there, and they continue to this day, make no mistake about it. But here's the latest one, because Charlie Peters has filed this report for us.
20 years after enduring a horrifying ordeal, grooming gang survivor Liz finally feels that she has justice for the abuse she suffered. In 2018, her abuser Ashgar Bostan was jailed for 9 years after he raped her twice in a flat in Rotherham between 2002 and 2004. Liz was groomed by a woman and kept in her flat where she was abused. But after Bostan was finally jailed in 2018 for 2 of the rapes that she suffered, Liz felt that he was not sufficiently punished.
It weren't high enough. But I suppose what I've got to take from that is the system doesn't really benefit victims anyway.
Bostan was released from prison last year, having served just half of his sentence and being moved to an open prison without Liz being informed. But after all of these failures, Liz has secured a landmark legal victory, with the High Court awarding a massive £425,000 in damages after she took civil action against Bostan for the crimes he was found guilty of in 2018.
I hope that people see this as a landmark case and that the floodgates have just opened, and I hope that it brings hope to other survivors, but also I hope that the perpetrators that commit these crimes, not historically but present, know that if this is how they're going to behave, this is what they're going to get.
Does it give you hope that even if the criminal justice system fails, survivors can fight for themselves to get the justice they deserve?
Yeah, totally. I think it's absolutely amazing. It's been a long process. It's been totally worth it. And I do hope that more survivors can come forward and bring their perpetrators to justice.
What do you think Ashgar Bostan feels like today?
I hope that he feels like I have done for the last 22 years. And I hope that this has learned him a very, very expensive lesson.
Elizabeth is one of thousands of Britain's many grooming gang victims. But many feel as though the punishments that their perpetrators received were insufficient. Elizabeth's lawyer now believes that with this landmark ruling, more punishment will finally arrive.
Liz's lawyer, Robin Tilbrook, took on her case to create a new legal precedent for grooming gang survivors.
I think we've got an icebreaker here where people can see what can be done, and hopefully many others will follow. They've been failed certainly by almost the entire system. You know, at last there is an opportunity to get some justice, some real justice.
Tilbrook now hopes that this icebreaker case will lead to new opportunities for survivors to take control and seek justice.
And I hope it will give them some closure on what happened. At last we've got an opportunity for individuals to get some justice. This has broken the ice, it shows the path to follow, and we've now got a clear way of achieving justice for these girls.
We've all been let down, you know, so we have a process of being the abused child to growing up, having psychological damage, to then not being able to access the services that we need because the funding's not there. It's consistently failing. I just wanted to do something for every single survivor that's suffering in this country. It's never ever been about money for me. It's about justice and basically being able to take a bit of control back. Because time after time we see this pattern of the survivors come last, the perpetrators come first. So I'm hoping that this case does bring that forward and that they actually, if they're out committing crimes now against new victims and new children, that they just think, well, that could be me.
Right, well, look, yes, that was an exclusive brought to you by Charlie Peters, who joins me right now in the studio. Charlie, why is this such a landmark ruling for the victims of grooming gangs?
Well, it's the first of its kind. It allows them, as Liz said in that report there, it allows survivors to take justice into their own hands. As you know, so many of these survivors have been let down by the authorities for decades. Liz herself, this abuse happened to her 20 years ago, and in that period, it took until 2018 for her perpetrator to finally be arrested. And what was the punishment that Mr Bostan received? 9 years in prison, of which only 2 were sent in a closed prison. He spent 2 years in an open prison.
Yeah.
And when he was moved to the open prison, she wasn't even informed, out in 4. And I think Liz, like many other survivors, felt that this was insufficient.
Yeah.
And so, in a landmark ruling, in an icebreaker test case, she gathered a legal team who took to the civil courts to try and achieve justice. And this £425,000 legal judgment of damages will essentially leave him penniless and leave a punishment that he never otherwise received.
Well, this is the thing, because, look, we all know it, don't we? And we talk about it loads here on GB News about victims not getting justice through the courts, for a start, people being allowed back into their communities, bumping into their perpetrators at the shops, which is absolutely disgusting and terrible, people fighting deportation. But one way, and nothing will ever be able to make up some of the damage that's been done to them, but one way of potentially getting some form of justice is through financial compensation. How will she get this money from this guy?
Well, the legal team very carefully put in an anonymity order to protect Liz's identity, but they also put in a freezing order on Mr Bostan's assets. Many of these perpetrators are extremely rich. They have several businesses. Indeed, abuse is a lucrative business. But now they can freeze all of his assets, as they have done for 2 years, so it's almost certain he'll have to sell his home to pay these damages, leaving him penniless. And also, we've often noted in these cases that abusers, when they endure their very short sentences, they often return to the community from where they bump into the survivors that they abused. In this situation, they have to sell their home, they'll almost certainly have to move. And now there are thousands of other survivors who I hope are seeing this story today and thinking, I could do the same.
This is absolutely fascinating, and make no mistake about it, ladies and gents, this is something that is a huge case and is going to be, I think, hearing a lot more about in the months and years to come as victims of grooming gangs, which are taking place and have taken place up and down the country, will now be thinking, if I can't get justice in the courts, if I don't feel secure and safe because this person is back out and about in my community, what they can essentially do is financially ruin those sick people who ruin their lives as well. Look, Charlie, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you. Great stuff. Charlie Peters there, GB News' documentary filmmaker, with another exclusive on the grooming gang disgrace that has been ripping across this country. We will not let it drop. Thank you very much, Charlie, as ever. Look, coming up, should the police be given more powers to clamp down on begging? It's a controversial one, this. It's part of Rishi Sunak's new plan to tackle antisocial behaviour. Some highlights on that, though, mean that if someone graffitis your wall, they could essentially be made to wear a high-vis jacket that might as well say, I'm a criminal moron, and then they have to clean it off. What do you make of that? I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
OK, so there were loads of different elements to Rishi Sunak's latest attempt to clamp down on, well, frankly, quite low-level crime. But arguably the most controversial bit was about nuisance beggars as part of his war on antisocial behaviour. So police will receive a series of new powers to move on beggars who are causing public distress, such as those who block shop doorways or ask for money at cash points. However, they will also be encouraged to make use of local accommodation and mental health services. With me now, I've got in the studio writer and broadcaster David Oldroyd-Bolt, and down the line, I have got the founder of Raise the Roof Homeless Project, is Carl Simpson. Great stuff, both of you. Thank you very much. Look, David, I'll start with you. I understand that you're quite against Rishi Sunak's idea to clamp down on nuisance beggars, are you?
Well, I'm sceptical of why he's doing it, because part of the police sentencing and crime bill last year got rid of the Vagrancy Act of 1824, which criminalised begging. So it just seems like he's got rid of one thing to bring it back in a different guise. And I think it's a rather tawdry ruse to try to make people who are worried about law and order, who are worried about antisocial behaviour, think that the government's doing something, when, in fact, it's doing absolutely nothing new. If they were going to criminalise begging in this way, why didn't they just stick with the legislation that was already on the statute book, amend it if necessary, as it was amended many, many times in its 200-year history, and use it?
Just to clarify quickly, David, so you're not actually dead against the idea from a moral perspective of, moving on beggars?
Well, no, I think that's perfectly reasonable. As long as, these people are obviously in distress, they should be offered the help that exists that civil society can provide them with. But I think it's a totally unnecessary, yet again, totally unnecessary piece of legislation.
All right, Carl, who is the founder of the Raise the Roof Homeless Project, just your views on this, and I'm assuming you're maybe coming at it from more of a moral standpoint, or you don't think it's right to, dehumanise beggars in this way, if that's what it is?
Well, exactly. There's several different types of beggars. People can beg for survival. A lot of people beg for addictions, and I feel that this is just going to move the problem on from one place to another. People with addiction will try and get substance from one way or another, and if it's not begging, it'll be through theft and other options. It's not a simple answer.
Look, just, I'll go back to you, Carl. There's a slight issue with your sound there. But, David, on this, do you think that realistically what this is now is just a smoke screen from the Tories? Because a lot of people will be saying, well, what about rapes, murders, knife crimes, burglaries, etc.? Realistically, I don't like the idea that my house might be graffitied, but can you do something about the more serious?
Well, quite. Burglary and car theft are pretty much uninvestigated now. And it just seems like they keep coming up with headline ideas that don't address the root cause of things. I totally agree with your other guest, forgive me, I've forgotten your name. There are so many different causes which need to be looked into. There are civil institutions that can do this. There are charities that should be doing this. But the idea that you need yet another piece of legislation to deal with this is silly. And here's an idea. How about we have a force of civilians empowered by law with the power of arrest and moving them on? You could put them in uniforms and have them walking around policing behaviour. You might even call them the police. And they might, look after civil society in this way. And they might deal with antisocial behaviour. But it seems to me that we don't actually have an effective police force at the moment. Therefore, all the legislation that exists to deal with these problems is not being effected.
All right, Carl, I'll just give it another go with you. So realistically now, do you think that it could have where do we put beggars? You move them on, they just go and sit somewhere else, don't they?
If they can't find money from begging, they're going to find it from elsewhere. Addictions just don't go away because begging is cancelled. It will become theft, muggings and all sorts of ways of getting it. There needs to be more help with people with addictions through places like dry hostels and things like that. I don't think just moving people on is an answer.
OK, all right, look, both of you, thank you very much. It was great stuff, that. David Oldroyd-Bolt there, writer and broadcaster, and, of course, founder of Raise the Roof Homeless Project, Carl Simpson, both of them reacting to Rishi Sunak's latest antisocial behaviour rules. Now, I'm just going to whiz you through something like this now, because it's about our rivers and our coastlines, and they're being damaged by raw sewage that is being pumped out at an astonishing rate. So the number has drastically fallen in comparison to the year before, but new data from the Environment Agency shows that raw sewage was dumped into our rivers 300,000 times last year. That's 800 times a day. But we don't really know the true amount, as there's hundreds of locations which are unmonitored. And it mostly happens when there's a storm and there's too much water in the systems. So it is staggering stuff. Joining me now is John Bosco and Wogbo, who is from We Own It. Now, look, sorry about this. It is going to be a bit short and sweet. But, yeah, I mean, people will be disgusted by the amount of raw sewage being pumped into our waterways.
Well, absolutely. And we all know why this is happening. This is happening because the private companies have failed over the last 25, 30 years of the privatization of our water system to invest in the infrastructure. Our infrastructure is broken because private companies have taken out £72 billion in profits since then, but haven't invested in the system. And that's why this is happening. This doesn't have to happen if we took the system back into public control and ownership.
OK, but what can happen in the short term without a wholesale... You know, can companies be fined for this stuff? I mean, what happens? You know, do I look at a river and see there's, you know, a load of raw sewage into it? Can I just track back that company and fine them to high heaven?
So the companies are currently already being fined. And in effect, because they often fined so little and they're making huge profits, the fines are often chalked up as business expenses. Whereas I think the real solution to this problem is striking at the heart of the problem, which is the profit-making motive at the heart of it. That's why it's really important for the government to step in and take these companies back into public ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not normally all for nationalisation of things, but I tell you what I am dead against, and that is raw sewage being pumped into our rivers and our oceans. So, I mean, maybe this is an area where actually I would be in favour of it. Look, John, thank you very much. John Bosco and Wogbo there from We Own It. We'll talk again soon when we've got a bit more time, my friend. Thank you very, very much. Right, now, that's it for this hour, but the Scottish National Party has a new leader. That leader is Humza Yousaf, and he says he's the luckiest man in the world to be replacing Nicola Sturgeon. How do you feel? And it's a big day in the Commons where the illegal migration bill is being debated. I will take you to that live. It's going to be fiery debate and discussion. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. It's 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News. And I've got a big hour coming your way because we're going to be taking you to the House of Commons, where there's going to be a fiery debate about the illegal migration bill. There was expected to be a big Tory rebellion from Conservative MPs who wanted Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak to toughen up on the bill. But that was not the reaction that Sunak and Braverman got when they went for a stroll around Chelmsford earlier. Well, and as you'll be able to see behind me there, Humza Yousaf is the new leader of the SNP. Here is the moment that he announced his victory.
I will aim to lead Scotland in the interests of all of our citizens, whatever your political allegiance.
Fair to say that's been a controversial appointment, isn't it? But there we go. Now, the ULEZ fight back. That's right. People are sick to death about being charged to high heaven, frankly, just taking their cars off their driveway. Find out what measures, quite funny actually, some members of the public have been taking to stop the ULEZ cameras catching them. All that coming your way and much, much more. Stay tuned. Just a little heads up on another one I've got for you as well, which is about a big debate, actually, on whether or not MPs should be allowed second jobs. I'm sure you've all seen some footage in a sting operation that took place and certain Tory MPs being enticed to take big sums in order to do a little bit of extra work on the side. Do you think that MPs should have second jobs? And, of course, I want to know your views about Humza Yousaf being the new king of the north, as it were. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, as Patrick was saying, Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party, taking over from Nicola Sturgeon. Scotland's Health Secretary claimed victory over Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan with 52% of the vote. At 37 years old, Mr Yousaf is set to become Scotland's youngest First Minister, and he's the first holder of the position to come from an ethnic minority background. Speaking at Murrayfields, he said he was honoured to be entrusted with the party leadership.
Not just humbled, of that I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as the leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, "The opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life."
The Prime Minister says he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to antisocial behaviour. During a visit to Essex today, Rishi Sunak unveiled a £160 million scheme that's going to include forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their communities. The government plans to make a laughing gas, that's a Class C drug with nitrous oxide banned before the end of the year. And the Prime Minister said current restrictions on gas aren't working.
What we're going to do over the course of the spring and the summer is consult on the best way to do this to make sure that it is effective. Tackling supply is important. That's why we've gone out after county line gangs and disrupted 3,500 of them. It's why we've toughened up sentencing for drug supply. It's why the police have got these things called Project Adder, for example, which is a national program to target drug gangs in particular. So all of those things help deal with supply. We need to get the consultation right.
Well, in response to that, Deputy Speaker of the House of Lords, Baroness Helen Newlove, thinks the crackdown should really start within education.
We've heard these measures before, and actually I welcome any measure that would stop antisocial behaviour, but there's nothing new in this that's already out there, and we've got to have the resources and people, the enable policing. And they mentioned probation officers, well, that's on its knees as well. So, no, I don't think any of these policies are new, and we're still going to struggle to tackle antisocial behaviour, most importantly with police who class it as lower level.
Jeremy Corbyn says Sir Keir Starmer has denigrated the democratic foundations of the Labour Party by taking forward plans to block him from standing for the next party election. Tomorrow, Sir Keir will propose a motion at a meeting of the party's ruling body to prevent the former Labour leader from being endorsed as a candidate. Mr Corbyn has been a Labour MP for Islington North in London since 1983. He says he's been proud to represent his community and he's not going anywhere. The Duke of Sussex and other celebrities, including Sir Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, have finished the first day of preliminary hearings at the High Court in London. Prince Harry and the other claimants launched legal action against associated newspapers for unlawful information gathering. The newspaper group denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to place listening devices in cars and homes and recording phone calls. Lawyers for the publishers of the Daily Mail say the privacy claims are stale and should be dismissed without a trial. In Israel, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will delay his controversial judicial overhaul after widespread rallies in the country. Hundreds of thousands of people have been taken to the streets in protest to the proposals which they say would weaken the courts. The Prime Minister's hard-right coalition party, Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, says the plans will now be looked at after the Passover parliamentary recess. Environmental charities and experts say an oil spill in Poole Harbour could have a devastating impact on sensitive nature reserves in the area. Around 200 barrels of fluid, including crude oil, leaked from a pipeline feeding the Witch Farm onshore processing facility, leading to a major incident being declared. Poole Harbour commissioners say the pipeline, which has been operated by the gas company Perenco, has since been shut down. Specialist oil spill teams using drones, boats and helicopters are working to identify further spills and assess the risk to the environment. That's your latest news at 5 o'clock. I'm back at past. See you then.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Now, it's one of Rishi Sunak's 5 key pledges to stop the illegal migrant boats from coming to the UK, and it is being debated in Westminster literally right now. So, the illegal migration bill is aimed at tackling migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats, and it's been controversial, with critics warning that it leaves the UK foul of international obligations. And yes, like I've said, this is being debated in the Commons right now, so we will go to that very shortly. But a rebellion from Tory MPs seeking amendments to the bill appears to have been seen off for now amid reports that Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who was potentially even classed as a rebel herself, which is a bit weird, isn't it, held talks with some of them ahead of the debate. Earlier today, the Prime Minister and Suella Braverman were heckled by a very angry lady on a visit to Chelmsford, demanding that they allow migrants into the country.
Migrants into this country! Go away! We don't want you here!
Well, I am joined now by our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. So we were expecting there to be a day of rebellion. We were expecting it to kick right off and a day of amendments left, right and centre, including potentially opposition from the actual Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. It is being debated in the House of Commons now, and hopefully we're going to bring you some shots of that shortly. But it's kind of petered out a little bit, has it?
All seems to have calmed down. First of all, they've only
just started debating it now. They'll be debating it. It's called Committee of the Whole House. It's at committee stage. Today and tomorrow, there'll be the third reading, then it goes to the Lords. But yes, we were hearing as late as overnight and this morning, there was going to be this big rebellion of 50, 60 Conservative MPs. And they want it toughening up. It's not tough enough, they said. But now it seems that they have been given reassurances. I mean, you heard Craig McKinley saying, you know, that they've been encouraged by assurances the government will give proper consideration to our concerns. And the government's argument basically is, as it stands, the legislation is Rishi Sunak says, tough piece of legislation, the likes of which we've never seen. The government believes it's strong enough that they will be able to do what they want to do, deport people to Rwanda or elsewhere, make it that if you come, you cannot stay and you will never be able to come back without changing this legislation. There seems to be, and it's quite opaque, some suggestion that the ECHR won't rule against them, that they won't block the government doing this. And the potential that if they do, the government might just disregard it. I mean, Craig McKinley was saying other countries, quite often these rulings come down.
Well, reading between the lines, that's what I got. For people who have just joined us, I did an interview with Craig McKinley earlier on, Conservative MP. You'll be able to see that on Twitter, online, etc. And I was really trying to drill down with Craig. What had changed? So why have the supposed Tory rebels, as we understand it, decided to fall in line behind the illegal migration bill? There were supposed amendments that wanted to get guarantees about us not kowtowing to the ECHR, about migrant hotels, so about hotels not being used. And from what we understand it looks as though that's changed and that they're not going to rebel against this, which implied to me that some kind of deal had been done with them. I thought he was relatively evasive, Catherine, when it came to this. He didn't really seem to want to be pinned down. It appears to me as though they're just going off trust, that Suella Braverman has just said to them, look, we are going to make sure that we ignore the ECHR. Reading between the lines, that's what I got out of it.
It does seem that way. Of course, we don't know what private assurances may have been given behind the scenes, but certainly the other thing is that they've apparently been told that if you push this now, you could risk scuppering the whole thing because it's already going to have a really rough ride in the House of Lords. So basically the message is don't make this any worse because you could bring the whole thing falling down. So let's just wait and see. So we'll see. I mean, they are rushing it through Parliament at pace. It could be on the statute books, you know, by the end of the summer, and people could be sent to Rwanda. And the theory is as soon as they start sending those planes of people, that people coming across will decide, well, actually, I'd rather stay in France. I don't want to go to Rwanda, and that will have a massive impact on
absolutely. Catherine, thank you very, very much. Catherine Forster, our political reporter. Like I've said, it is currently being discussed in the House of Commons, so hopefully we can actually see and hear some of that at some point soon. But joining me now is political commentator John Oxley, who is down the line, I believe. Yes, there we go. John, right, thank you very much. Look, what do you understand has taken place here? Because we were thinking there was going to be quite a big rebellion. It looks as though they've fallen in line. Why?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where it's hard to know what was said inside the room, what was said inside the meeting with the rebels. But clearly, there's been a good bit of parliamentary management from Rishi Sunak and his whips team to get these potential rebels on side. They've made some assurances, but also potentially maybe the rebels just didn't have the numbers to force the government's hand that much. You never quite know with these things. You know, people say sort of, 60 people are going to vote against, but it may well be when you get into that meeting with the whips, when it comes to actually voting against your own government, people have been, phoned up, they've been spoken to in the corridor, and maybe you only have 20 or 30 and suddenly you look a lot less of a threat and it's easier to buy you off as a group.
Indeed, I get that it's easier maybe to buy off as a group, but one of the big concerns was that Suella Braverman herself might not actually be wholeheartedly behind the very bill that she's now pushing.
Well, yes, and that would be quite dramatic. And of course, if a member of the government, someone who has a cabinet position votes against the government, then they'd be expected to resign. And that would have been a huge political headache for Rishi Sunak. It would have been an open challenge from the right wing of the party, sort of saying you're not tough enough on this, and really throwing down the gauntlet.
Of illegal migrants is growing exponentially.
My amendments, I believe, and in further discussion with the government, are...
OK, right, well, sorry, you were interrupted by Bill Cash there for some reason, who is, of course, one of the individuals who's been putting forward an amendment, but I'll return to you. Hopefully we can go back to Bill Cash in a moment or two. But you were saying that Suella Braverman might not be herself completely behind this legislation.
It seems this way. I mean, all through, her time as Home Secretary, she's been very hardline. She wasn't a supporter of Rishi Sunak. Bringing her back on board was seen as a sort of move towards the right of the party. And certainly, if she has leadership ambitions in the future, she's going to want to be, as tough as possible on this. That's where she sees her support in the party coming from. But, if she does go against her own legislation and vote against this, she'd have to resign. So that'd be a huge, huge move from the Home Secretary against the sitting Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, look, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be keeping people up to date on that more and more throughout the course of this show, as indeed those discussions do take place in the House of Commons. That's John Oxley there, he's a political commentator. Thank you for that. So, yeah, just to fill you in, ladies and gents, there is currently a discussion taking place in the Commons about whether or not this illegal migration bill goes far enough. But we're going to whiz you north of the border now and go to Scotland, because the SNP have elected a new leader, and that is Humza Yousaf. So Yousaf has replaced Nicola Sturgeon, who resigned after 8 years as Scotland's First Minister. He won the leadership contest ahead of Kate Forbes and, to a lesser extent, Ash Regan as well, and is Scotland's first leader from an ethnic minority background. Joining me now is Alistair Stewart, who's a columnist at The Scotsman. Alistair, great stuff, thank you very much. Good grief, that 52-48% figure again. I thought we'd managed to park that in the wake of Brexit, but no, it's back to haunt us. Not a resounding victory, but crucially a victory nonetheless for Humza Yousaf, a majority.
Yeah, I don't quite think it's going to be a generation. The line on this one when it comes to Scottish politics is once a generation between votes. Humza Yousaf and this leadership contest has very much seen a dramatic split down the lines of the SNP. What's interesting about this is not so much the elevation of Humza Yousaf, but it's by how much Kate Forbes lost by. Kate Forbes has been colloquially referred to as a tartan Tory. She lost by nearly 2,000 votes. Slightly over 2,000 votes, and she's got quite right-wing credentials. She's very pro-business in the sort of ranks of the SNP. Her campaign is centred on doing things very differently to Nicola Sturgeon, where Humza Yousaf and his supporters have cried out, this is the way, I'm the continuity candidate, I'm the one that's going to continue all the good stuff that's come before. The issue with this election is it's shown that all of that good stuff has been not as great as a lot of people would be presenting it in the SNP.
Well, this is
there are serious questions.
This is exactly, you led me exactly on to my next question, which is that what is the continuity here? Because as far as Humza Yousaf is concerned, people would be forgiven for thinking, well, the continuity is absolutely shocking. As Transport Minister, was found driving without insurance. As Health Minister, the Scottish nurses are saying that the NHS north of the border is absolutely crumbling and is going to fail. Transport Minister, of course, like I've said to you before, then actually, yes, was found, to be driving without insurance. I mean, there's not a lot of great stuff, is there, for Humza Yousaf to cling on to?
No, I think that there are other issues there as well, the ones that you mentioned, that if this was a normal leadership election, you could probably get away with saying that I'm the one that's going to carry on with the nice policies of my predecessor. The issue is that the SNP rank and file organisation has come into question during this leadership election. Peter Murrell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband, also former chief executive of the SNP, had stepped down, as did their head of comms. There have been a raft of resignations. All of it speaks of a party that is in decline. If Humza Yousaf had had a clear mandate, that is to say, if he'd won the first round of the leadership election, his campaign and his elevation would be much easier to say. I'm going to continue the nice stuff, the good policies, the ones that have been the vote winners for the SNP. Unfortunately, that's not been the case for him. He leads now a party that's very much divided, and it is unfortunate to say that it was not as divided as it was under Nicola Sturgeon. This breakage, this breakup of popularity, as it were, with the SNP in the popular mind has occurred in the last 5 weeks. He has a big challenge ahead of him.
What does this mean for Scottish independence?
I don't think it's going to be happening anytime soon. That is not to say it's going to disappear anytime soon. Humza Yousaf, as the continuity candidate, is going to be talking about independence just as much as his predecessors, but I've yet to see anything that is tantamount to a plan to achieve it. That was what forced Nicola Sturgeon's hand. That's what forced her from office ultimately. And I think it's going to be an absolute anchor around Humza Yousaf before he gets started.
Is it fair to say that maybe the big winners out of this are actually the Labour Party?
I would agree with that. It's shown that the SNP do not have a stranglehold in Scottish politics when it comes to a centre-left alternative. Anna Sarwar, who leads the Labour Party, has been fighting back. He's been putting forward a raft of alternative policies to the SNP. He's been leading quite a strong direction as a vote for me is a vote for something different. If you look at the SNP and you look at now 17 years in government, then they've been struggling. They've been struggling with their record. They've still been getting support in the polls. But I think now that the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon has come to an end, the absence of a big beast, Humza Yousaf is going to be in trouble and Labour will see a resurgence.
Yeah, look, Alistair, thank you very, very much. We'll talk again soon. Alistair Stewart there, who is a columnist at The Scotsman. Right, now, one of the big issues that did for Nicola Sturgeon was trans rights and the trans men in women's prisons, etc. And this, frankly, is an issue that's not going away anytime soon. It was also a further development to this was put forward because it emerged that Katie Forbes was against gay marriage. She said, didn't she, that she was doing it off religious backgrounds and that would have no impact in terms of her actual policy. It's also interesting, though, isn't it, that Humza Yousaf, so the new leader of the SNP, soon to be officially anointed as First Minister, wasn't there for the vote when it came to gay marriage. So he managed to essentially swerve it, really. I'm joined now by gay rights activist Malcolm Clark to give his take on this. Malcolm, thank you very, very much. How do you feel today about gay rights north of the border, knowing that Humza Yousaf, the new leader, just beat a woman who is dead against it and he didn't actually bother to turn up for the vote on it?
Well, I mean, everybody complained, everybody in the LGBT groups in Scotland complained about Kate Forbes, but I don't remember ever hearing that Humza had gone to the mosque in Glasgow and had spoken in favour of gay rights. He's never actually taken any position. He's never challenged any homophobia in the Muslim community in Scotland. So I think he was performative. At least with Kate Forbes, you could say that she was upfront about the fact that she didn't agree with gay marriage. One of the things I think there's a real problem in Scotland, and that's that the SNP has championed a particular approach to politics where LGBT rights are really prominent. And yet, actually, they don't the policies that they put forward have not been signed off by the gay community. They don't represent the gay community. They only represent a tiny clique, very connected politicians, the Stonewalls of the world and the other LGBT groups. And it suits them, but it doesn't necessarily advance gay people's interests.
Can I just ask you, do you feel a bit used? Do you think that the gay community and the LGBT... I hate to say this because it's all bracketed into one with the same level of letters, isn't it? But there's radical different views and rights in between. But the LGBTQ+, whatever the heck it is, community, do you feel a bit used by some members of the, quote, progressive left? It's almost like they're just holding you up to go, look, I'm a nice person. Actually, they don't do much, do they?
Well, it's not the only... I mean, I've written in the past about countries like Argentina and Malta, really deeply dysfunctional countries where they're run really badly, and yet they're pioneers of the latest iteration of LGBTQ rights. And in a funny way, the SNP is exactly like that. They can't run transport, they can't run health, they can't run education, but they're waving this big rainbow flag. And so, who knows, in the LGBTQ plus acronym, I don't know what Q means anyway. I'm absolutely worried what the plus might mean. But in terms of gay rights, yeah, a lot of gay people feel that, we've got our rights, we want them upheld, of course, but we want nothing to do with ridiculous policies like self-ID, which are, the last thing the gay community wants is to be seen in a war against 51% of the population, women. And so there's more and more lesbians and gay people speaking out against the sort of the more woke version of what's become known as LGBTQ rights.
Look, I'm obviously not asking you to speak on behalf of all gay people, but do you think you would have rather have had a woman in charge who said, I, through religious grounds, oppose gay marriage, but I'm not going to let that actually impact the policy decisions that I make, I'm not going to repeal anything, or a bloke who quite possibly has been very dishonest about his actual views about it?
Well, I mean, I'm not a member of the SNP, but I would have voted for Kate Forbes because she sounded in the debates like she was competent, that she was going to run the economy, she was pro-business, and she talked about creating jobs. If anybody thinks that Humza Yousaf could create any jobs outside the actual nomenclature of the SNP government, then, you know, they're on a hiding to nothing. The guy seems to me pretty incompetent. But and so, you know, gay people have to work out for themselves. I would have thought quite a lot of gay people would have voted for a competent character rather than an incompetent one.
Malcolm, look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, actually, and hopefully we do talk again soon. Malcolm Clark, there's a gay rights activist, giving his view about what has been such a, well, ridiculously contentious issue north of the border, but there we go. Right, moving on. Prince Harry, he's been in court today. No, not for that. He's suing the publisher of the Daily Mail. I'll give you the latest on it very, very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, welcome back. Now, Prince Harry has left the High Court after the first day of the start of legal proceedings, preliminary hearings involving alleged phone hacking by publishers of the Daily Mail. The Duke of Sussex is among individuals like Sir Elton John, Liz Hurley, Sadie Frost, suing associated newspapers. And the Prince arrived, quite surprisingly, actually, with a security detail before bumping into a photographer. There you go. Popped a pap, didn't he? And was then quickly ushered inside. Well, our national reporter, Ellie Costello, joins us from the High Court after, well, quite an unusual day. Ellie, I believe, is with me now. Yes, well, what happened?
Well, good afternoon to you, Patrick. Yes, Prince Harry has left the building. And yes, what a total surprise. As you said, it's only meant to be preliminary hearings this week. We were told last night that none of the high-profile claimants would actually be appearing in person. It would only be written submissions. And then I was sat here this morning just opposite the High Court when there was a sense that something was about to happen. There's heavy police presence, barriers were being put out, and we got just there in time time to see Prince Harry, of all people, step out of a black London cab and walk through the front doors of the Royal Courts of Justice. He was certainly a man who wanted to be seen. He took the time to say good morning to the press as he went in. He actually bumped into a paparazzi on his way through into the courtroom, but he certainly did want to be here in person and surprised many people. Nobody even knew he was in the UK, let alone going to be appearing in court. He was actually joined by Sir Elton John at lunchtime, who appeared through a side entrance, and just 2 seats away from Prince Harry in the back of that courtroom was the actress Sadie Frost. Just 3 of the high-profile claimants that are bringing this case. So clearly, to these claimants, to these celebrities, optics is everything, and they want to be seen in that courtroom. These are only the preliminary hearings. They don't need to be in court, but it's quite clear that they want this taken to a full trial. So what happened today, Patrick? Well, they are accusing the Associated Newspapers Limited of serious breaches of privacy. They are the publishers of publications such as the Mail Online, the Sunday Mail and the Daily Mail as well. They accuse them as well of alleged illegal information gathering, things like bugging of phones, putting microphones in cars. In written submissions today, actually, we saw that Liz Hurley had her phone bugged, and Hugh Grant, who she was with at the time, had a microphone allegedly placed into his vehicle. Just some of the allegations that these claimants are making. But there was also the impersonation of individuals to obtain hospital records and the access of bank accounts, which was allegedly done through manipulation and illicit means. Those are just some of the claims being brought by the claimants. The barrister David Sherborne said that these allegations ranged from a period between 1993 and 2011, even all the way up to 2018. So we did get a sense of quite how long these claimants say this has been going on for. And we also got a detail of how it's impacted on them as well. We heard about Sir Elton John and his husband having to hire someone to watch cameras in their home every night because the disclosure of their private information in the press had frightened them just so much. Well, the Associated Newspapers, they deny all of those claims, all of those allegations. They've actually described them as preposterous smears. They say this is a fishing expedition by the claimants and their lawyers. And they also say it's too late to bring this action. They point to the fact that some of the articles being brought up are 30 years old, and they describe the case as stale. They are asking for it to be thrown out, but the judge is going to spend the next 4 days listening to this preliminary evidence and deciding whether there is enough there to take it to a full trial.
Ellie, thank you very much. As ever, Ellie Costello, they're our national reporter outside the High Court, and we'll be keeping you bang up to date for any more developments in the old Prince Harry case, won't we? Now, there's loads more to come between now and the end of the hour. Police are strip-searching children as young as 8, believe it or not. I'll be getting a reaction to those findings of a damning new report, and how the Mayor of London's controversial ULEZ scheme aimed at fighting pollution is meeting some, well, it's fair to say, direct resistance. Some really interesting ways, novel ways. Of course, we can't condone any civil disobedience, but some quite funny ways in which people are trying to ruin ULEZ, and they're saying, no, we've had enough. Anyway, sign down for your latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Hello to you. The latest headlines this hour. Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party. Scotland's Health Secretary claimed victory over Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan with 52% of the vote. Outgoing leader Nicola Sturgeon says he'll be an outstanding successor. And at 37, Mr Yousaf is said to become Scotland's youngest First Minister, and he's the first holder of the position to come from an ethnic minority background. Speaking at Murrayfields, he said he was honoured to be entrusted with the party leadership.
Not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as the leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, the opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life.
The Prime Minister says he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to antisocial behaviour. During a visit to Essex, Rishi Sunak unveiled a £160 million scheme that's going to include forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their communities. The government plans to make laughing gas a Class C drug with nitrous oxide banned before the end of the year. And as you've been hearing, the Duke of Sussex and other celebrities, including Sir Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, have finished their first day of preliminary hearings at the High Court in London. Prince Harry and the other claimants have launched legal action against associated newspapers for unlawful information gathering. The newspaper group denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to place listening devices in cars and homes and recording phone calls. Lawyers for the publishers of the Daily Mail say the privacy claims are stale and should be dismissed without a trial. Multiple victims are being treated after a shooting at a school in Tennessee. Nashville Police Department says the gunman at the Covenant School in Nashville has been shot dead. The private Christian secondary school has around 200 students. You're up to date with the latest news headlines. I'm back at 6. See you then.
OK, welcome back. Now, a new report has revealed nearly 3,000 children were strip-searched in England and Wales over a 4-year period. Figures published by the Children's Commissioner for England show more than half of the searches between 2018 and 2022 took place without an appropriate adult confirmed to be present. And it also found that black children were up to 6 times more likely to be searched than the overall child population. We've been able to drill down into these numbers and have a look at some of the wider context. It's Ken Hines, he's chair of Haringey's Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. Ken, look, thank you very much. Look, at face value, this is deeply, deeply disturbing stuff. Not just the racial element to it, but just the fact, really, that kids are being strip-searched without an appropriate adult. What's your initial take on it?
What you allude to miss out from there, children as young as 8. It's adultification going on there. And my take on simply this is that it's very concerning that many of these searches are done against the actual guidelines that they're supposed to be following with having an appropriate adult that's there. And in some cases, because we've got a case that we're dealing with now, in some cases, they don't even record the actual search that's taken place, the intimate search that's taken place.
It's a bit grim, really, this, to be honest with you. And, I mean, it sounds like it probably should be illegal, really, the idea that an 8-year-old could be strip-searched by an adult without an appropriate adult present.
Well, and whether an adult is present or not, I would question what circumstances would you need to search a young person, a child. Now, to me, even if you think that child has got a weapon, I'm on the door, I do security, and I've got a 1. So I can, a metal detector that can actually pick up any kind of metal or any kind of things of that nature. And if that's the situation, then you can actually drill it down to know where that is.
I suppose the argument would be that a load of county lines gangs are packing kids full of drugs and sending them on their way to deliver those drugs to whoever, so that with the view that those children would not be stopped by police. And so what do the police do in that situation?
Quite simply, if you believe that that child has got drugs on them, then what you can do is, again, you can get the parent in. Because you wouldn't need to go and strip search them, because that should be dealt with a public health issue rather than a criminal element on it. Because how much could a child be packing in that instant that will bring such an alarm to the police in that regard? Personally, common sense needs to prevail. And usually it's a smell of cannabis, like Child Q. It was the smell of cannabis that led to her being strip searched in the school. And that was done inappropriately, because it says, the guideline says that if you're going to do a more intimate search, as they did with her, it should be done in a police station, not in a school, not in the back of the police van, not in a sweet shop.
And an element of this which we're getting onto now, which is that apparently black children are 6 times more likely to undergo this kind of search. Now, does this mean that there is institutional racism in the police, or does it mean that, for whatever reason it may be, more black children are getting involved with things like county lines and gangs, etc.?
I can tell you, as a person who's been campaigning and been affected by this for over the last 40 years, that the racial element, and if you go back to all the reports that's gone on there, with the Scarman report, with the Macpherson report, with the David Lammy report, with the HMIC report, they all allude to institutionalised racism.
Do they also say, though, that there are more children of an ethnic minority background who, for whatever reason, happen to be getting involved? Is it both, is what I'm getting at?
No, I would strongly disagree that there's more people from the ethnic background, but the black community that's getting involved in drugs. I believe that there is a degree of grooming that is going on, that they become victim to people who are trying to manipulate them in that regard. But to say that they now become perpetrators when they should be treated in the manner that we treat any victim in, and we should show empathy, and we should put a wraparound system around these young people to find out what's going on and to change their hazarded behaviour.
Look, I think every single person watching and listening to this will find it shocking, really, the level of just children, regardless of the racial element of it, just kids in general who are strip-searched. I think a lot of people will be concerned about what those kids might be carrying, and maybe a slightly difficult job for police. Is it a slightly unfortunate fact, though, Ken, that in a lot of inner-city areas we have, huge levels of multiculturalism, etc., and in a lot of those inner-city areas, that's where you're going to see more drug dealing, just because of the nature of it. So could that really be slightly clouding the figures to make it look as though police are going after targeting people of ethnic minority backgrounds, is what I'm getting at. But you seem to think that they are.
No, I tell you what I see. Month in, for the year in, decades in, I see the similar sort of trend that at least 7% of their stop and search is under the misuse of drugs. 90% of that is under the smell of cannabis. Now, we know that there's a bigger issue around Class A sort of drugs, crack, cocaine and heroin. But yet the figures do not allude to them taking off these drugs in the quantity. But yet they will say to me quite clearly, well, we can smoke cannabis, but we can't smoke coke or heroin. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't make me smart if I can smell it. But like everything else, if I smoke it around you and you walked off somewhere else,
well, you only have to step outside in London and you smell cannabis.
And the smell is on you. And when the police dog could pick it up on you, and the next thing is you get stopped and searched. But I don't think they would go as far with you as they would with me. They might just go and search your pockets and then let you go. But with me, they may want to go a bit deeper and give me a more intimate search.
Look, Ken, thank you very much, as ever, my good man. Take care, and we'll chat to you very, very soon. That is Ken Hines, chair of Haringey's Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group, reacting to those latest figures around children, around not just stop and search as well, strip searching, etc. But we're moving on from that now because Sadiq Khan is extending London's ultra-low emission zone. Again, I want to emphasise, this might sound like a London-centric story, but it's not, because it's coming to a town and a city near you, and I'll tell you for why in a matter of moments. I'll also be telling you although we can't possibly condone it, rather hilarious ways that people are fighting back. I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
OK, people, I've got loads coming your way. We're just going to continue a little bit with the crime theme now, though, because the government is trying to crack down, if you'll excuse the pun, on antisocial behaviour. One behaviour that's caught attention today is two teenagers who actually broke into a swan sanctuary and murdered 4 swans and injured at least a dozen more. So they broke into the sanctuary in Datchet in Berkshire last summer. They tortured the animals by firing catapults during an attack which lasted 20 minutes. One of the boys, who's 13 years old, has been convicted of causing unnecessary suffering to protected animals, and he's received a 6-month referral order to a youth offending team. It's especially relevant given the fact that today, and we heard from her in the Commons earlier, Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak are trying to introduce their new antisocial behaviour laws and clamp down, really, on stuff like this, aren't they? Joining me now is Wendy Herman, who's the manager of the Swan Support Sanctuary in Datchet. Look, thank you very, very much for joining us. This is absolutely horrific that this happened. Just talk us through your views on this.
I've been doing this for 30 years, and I will say that it's the most sickening thing I've ever seen in my life. When we first looked back on the CCTV, we actually watched them with catapults for 20 minutes, and I was physically sick through what I see, and it took me months to get over it. I wasn't sleeping or anything, and it took a long time before the police actually caught one of them.
And you had it all on CCTV, as you've said there, and it did apparently take a long time for the police to actually catch up with them, which is pretty remarkable, really, in that sense. What do you make of the sentences that have been passed? Do you think it's fitting of the crime committed? Is there a 6-month referral order?
Absolutely not. I think it's disgusting. We're really upset and feel let down by the justice system. I will say the police and the CPS got it to court, and we feel we've been let down by the magistrates because they're the one who gives the sentence. And a 6-month referral order for someone who committed this offence, not just on one day, they'd done it on 2 separate days, and we caught them twice on CCTV. They came back. To get a 6-month referral order isn't enough punishment. I mean, what sort of deterrent is that to other kids? I think 13 years old is young, I know that, but if they're old enough to do the crime, they should be punished like an adult. And 6 months is nothing. 6 months referral is just to clock in every week. What sort of message does that give across? They should have used this opportunity to make an example of them.
Yeah, look, I'm inclined to agree with you. And people say 13-year-old is young. I'm sorry, it's not that young. It's not that young at all to know that you shouldn't be breaking into a particular site, and torturing animals to death. I mean, I think even very young children are aware that that's a problem. Look, today it's been announced that there's going to be a crackdown on things like begging in the street and people going out and graffitiing things and fly tipping, for example. Presumably, you think maybe that's missed the mark and they should be doing more to give proper sentences to people who do commit essentially violent acts against animals, like what you've had to deal with.
I mean, absolutely. Crime is everywhere. Antisocial behaviour is everywhere, and I do get that. But they say animal crime is. I don't think animal crime is taken seriously enough by the system. You know, where do these boys? They start somewhere. What's next? A person?
Yes.
You know, I think they need to start at the bottom. And then work their way up in this. You know, what are they going to do in 5 years' time? Go and attack a person? I don't know. I just think that we let down in society, I think.
Look, I'm very sorry, obviously, to interview you under such bleak circumstances and to learn a bit more about what you had to go through. But I do wish you all the very best, and I know that you're just trying to do your best for animals that need our protection. So good luck to you. Take care, and hopefully next time we talk it's for, you know, a nicer reason. But there we go. All right, thank you very, very much. That is... Yeah, a pretty grim, actually, isn't it, I think, ladies and gentlemen? What do you make of that? Because I think she's absolutely spot on there, really, which is the idea that if someone starts with antisocial behaviour against animals, then they tend to move on to people, don't they, at some point soon? So I think that's pretty staggering that they've only got a rather menial sentence there. Suspended one. Wendy Herman there is the manager of Swan Support Sanctuary in Datchet. Well, look, moving on. Here's a story that's a real honey trap. A probe has been found that 10 types of British honey failed a European Union authenticity test, which is very difficult to say. The European Commission has exposed adulteration of honey with cheap sugar syrup. And apparently in all, 10 ordinary honey samples were there. Most of the fake honey comes from Turkey and China. Agriculture journalist and farmer Bruce Jobson joins me now. Look, I'm sorry, Bruce, you're going to have to just fill me in on exactly what's gone on here, I'm afraid. So what's happened? British honey is a fraud, is it?
No, not quite, Patrick, but it doesn't surprise me. What has been going on for years, this has happened for years and years and years, and I have to say, it's the EU who've checked it out. And it was the same with the horse meat scandal. You know, that came through from the Ireland Food Standards Agency. And we haven't got the resources in this country. We have not supplied the resources to check these things. But if you look at the actual listing, there was 320 samples taken and 147 were suspicious. So that's 46% of the total. France had 81% and Germany 50%. So, you know, it's not just a UK, situation. Oh. Although, let's be fair, we topped the league with 100%, Patrick. We topped the league. This is, wonderful news. We've done something good. But now these companies should be named and shamed. The consumers being ripped off.
I didn't realise that this is such a big scandal, actually. I mean, it's a sticky mess, isn't it? I mean, there we go, that's somebody else now. But, yes, anyway, for at least a while I was talking to Bruce Jobson about honey. So we're going to move on from that now, I believe. Right, thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch as well. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's have a look now. Yes, there have been lots of reaction to the strip searching as well that we were talking about earlier on, about, unfortunately, children being strip searched. Gary has been on touch and he just says, look, this is absolutely disgraceful. Adults are using children, and you can understand exactly why the police are actually having to do this now. So, yes, I'll delve back into the inbox shortly. But moving on now, Sadiq Khan is planning to expand the ULEZ zone in London, the ultra-low emissions zone. By the end of August, it will cover all 32 London boroughs rather than just the centre. It means vehicles which do not meet European emission standards will have to pay £12.50 for every day that they use their car within London. Again, I want to emphasise, it sounds like a London-centric story, this, but it's not, because I'm telling you, it is going to come to a town and city near you if it hasn't already. I'm joined now by John Markar, who's host of the Driven Chat podcast and editor-in-chief of drivenchat.com. We got a sneaky peek of him earlier on. It looked as though he'd morphed into a honey expert, but now, no, he's back on with his normal brief. I will not ask you about honey, John. I will instead ask you about ULEZ. So, basically, the crux of this story actually should have read that people have taken to covering ULEZ cameras with bags and a little bit of civil disobedience, which, of course, we can't possibly condone. What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. We can't condone vandalism of any variety, but I think the reason that people are so angry is clear. You know, we can completely understand and sympathise with a huge number of Londoners now who are suddenly subject to an additional outlay of cost at a time where just about everything in the world seems to be very, very expensive. Yeah, I mean, looking at some figures, we've seen that last year, 2022, ULEZ, as it stands now, so the current ULEZ system, raised an incredible £226 million in revenue. This is before they've expanded, before they've gone into the wider area. And I mean, the predictions are clear as to what is going to happen next. Obviously, that figure is going to jump up massively. But interestingly, so has the infrastructure spend. So in order to get things like cameras put up, to put signage up all around London in these new catchment areas for drivers, to make them aware that the ULEZ, they're entering the zone.
The taxpayer is paying for these cameras, which were already bought before a consultation in London about it. Then it's the taxpayer who's going to get clobbered with the fines. OK, so there's that element to it. Is it actually going to make a material difference to our air quality?
Well, here's the thing. This is where it becomes really interesting, because I am a motoring journalist. I will always celebrate the car, and in most forms, for me, I prefer good old-fashioned petrol and diesel power and classic cars. However, I completely and utterly get the point that we need to have cleaner air in cities. Completely, of course. I'm not going to argue that at all. But the method in which we're going about changing the system, I don't think necessarily has been entirely thought through. We are essentially moving the problem elsewhere. We're pushing the problem further out. And this is only the system on getting people into the type of cars, because, of course, people are now having to go out and buy new cars, replacing
Well, they are, and it clobbers the poorest. It clobbers the poorest. Look, John, thank you very much. I'm sorry that it was so short and sweet, that, but we had to fit in a little bit about honey, bizarrely. But John Markle there, who's the host of the Driven Chat podcast and editor of drivenchat.com. Very, very short time now, ladies and gentlemen. Michelle Dewberry joins me. Michelle, you all right?
I am. I don't like these ULEZ things, though. I see it as a war on cars, and you say they'll be coming to a city nearby. These are already in loads of cities, clean air zones. And I just see it as a little bit of an ongoing war on getting us out of our cars and onto push bikes, or, heaven forbid, our feet.
Well, there you go. People have been putting bags over the cameras, and people say they should put one over my head instead. But I've been Patrick Christys, and I will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Up next, Jubes & Co.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance.